Good morning. My name is Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' Weekly Meeting for October 29th. Commissioner Gilman, any preliminary matters? Are you ready to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Good morning. I would approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Plant?
I would also approve the consent agenda.
As would I. Before we get into it, I just want to give everybody a heads up that I'm going to rearrange the agenda order a little bit. We'll go through the non-energy items first, and then I was thinking we'd start the energy discussion with the BVEM rules, take up the Public Service Company DSP last, and do the two Black Hills items together, starting with the ERP and shifting to the DSP. So with that, let's jump into the agenda and start with the Senate Bill 21272 regarding equity. Mr. DeCenzo.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mitchell DeCenzo for Commission Counsel. Today, I'm presenting a notice of proposed rulemaking that proposes amendments to the Commission's Rules of Practice and Procedure to implement equity considerations consistent with Senate Bill 21272. As a way of brief background, SB 21272 directed the Commission to consider how best to provide equity, minimize impacts, and prioritize benefits for disproportionately impacted communities to address historical inequalities in all of its work. To support implementation of this directive, the Commission opened proceeding number 22M-0171 all on April 28, 2022, with Commissioner Gilman assigned as hearing commissioner. Through that proceeding, Commissioner Gilman directed staff in conducting multiple community stakeholder outreach meetings and workshops. That proceeding culminated in the staff capstone report, which was issued on July 22, 2024. And that report synthesized stakeholder input, identified areas requiring further legislative guidance, and recommended rule and policy changes to implement equity considerations into Commission processes. Concurrent with these processes and based on broad input from community and cross-agency stakeholders, Director White has in parallel been working to update Commission policies, including to improve language outreach and access, tribal consultation, as well as website and other updates to similarly improve accessibility and inclusion in her role managing the Commission and its staff. The proposed rules before you today are largely based on the findings and recommendations of the capstone report and are intended to improve Commission processes before the Commission to better implement equity considerations throughout the Commission's rules of practice and procedure. The proposed rules strive to do this primarily through the creation of a new category of proceeding titled Equity Impact Proceedings, codified in proposed rules 1600 through 1604. This designation applies primarily to energy-related proceedings such as electric resource plans, distribution system plans, and gas infrastructure plans, but also includes applications for approval of emergency telephone charges in excess of the established threshold. The proposed rules also give the Commission discretion to designate proceedings as equity impact proceedings as they deem appropriate. The ultimate aim is to establish a framework that flags outreach, notice, and filing processes in these proceedings to better allow opportunities for parties through their advocacy and filings, as well as other stakeholders, to incorporate equity and minimize harm and prioritize benefits to disproportionately impacted communities consistent with the directives of SB 21272. For example, the proposed rules establish outreach and filing requirements for utilities and require the Commission to address equity considerations in its final decisions, including how proceedings may affect disproportionately impacted communities and proceedings that are designated as equity impact proceedings. Other issues discussed in the capstone report are also referenced and addressed in the NOPR, including the public comment process, how representatives of disproportionately impacted communities can receive notice of proceedings that may affect their communities, and language accessibility. The rules further update definitions to follow statutory directives on identification of disproportionately impacted communities using the EnviroScreen tool. However, these definitions also recognize various forms of equity that may be raised in the context of a proceeding and flag vulnerable populations that may warrant special emphasis in the particular context of a given proceeding to allow parties and the Commission to elevate and better evaluate issues raised. Additionally, and in line with the capstone report, we recognize that certain changes to implement equity and commission processes can be more effectively accomplished through updates to internal processes. Therefore, and as I've noted Director Wright has already been doing, the NOPR explains that alongside this rulemaking, internal policy updates will continue to further update equity and participation processes beyond the scope of formal proceedings. The NOPR includes, for example, community compensation, language access, and tribal consultation as areas for emphasis, and notes that many of these updates will be ongoing in parallel with the NOPR through internal policy updates. Lastly, I will say that in addition to external stakeholder outreach, the proposed rules were further developed through a collaborative pre-rulemaking process. In addition to general counsel support and input was also received from commission advisory staff, administrative law judges, as well as trial staff and trial counsel, particularly to ensure that the proposed changes are administratively feasible and aligned with current staffing and procedural capacities. One of the concerns raised in the capstone report was that many of these endeavors would take significant staffing and support. But by working with internal stakeholders, including the director and a broad array of staff personnel, we believe the proposed rules set the commission up for process improvements that can be practically implemented. As noted in the capstone, this will necessarily be an iterative process to improve proceedings and commission equity considerations in inclusive accessibility. For example, the NOPR discusses that some suggestions in the capstone, like broader multi-year equity planning proceedings, are not proposed at this time, but could be an incremental inclusion in the future. Continued comments are, of course, requested to move these rules forward in a meaningful and actionable way. A draft notice of proposed rulemaking and accompanying rules were circulated, and if you agree, we can add any emphasis per your conversation today. Also, as drafted in the proposed NOPR, and with your discussion today, while the Commission could keep this en banc or refer to an individual commissioner as hearing officer, given Commissioner Gilman's engagement throughout the capstone and workshop processes, we do think that this rulemaking has sufficient direction and support to be referred to an administrative law judge. An ALJ could guide the process for additional outreach and public comment, in addition to further proposed rule revisions in the coming months. We would therefore recommend that the Commission discuss its interests and emphasis today and confirm whether it would issue a notice of proposed rulemaking with the proposed rules and refer this matter to an ALJ. I'll be available to answer any of your questions that you all may have and can hand it off for your discussion.
Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. DeCenzo. Appreciate it. And really happy to see some rules finally come before us being proposed and move forward in that process. It's been a long process since Senate Bill 272 passed, and we've had a really dynamic outreach effort, certainly for the Commission's kind of experience in trying to ensure that we're hearing from communities, hearing from groups and organizations to help ensure that we can really fulfill the expectations and the promise of Senate Bill 272. So a big thank you, first of all, to those both internally and externally who have kind of ushered this along to get to this point. As Mr. DeCenzo pointed out, this has really been kind of a multifaceted effort and will continue to be, that includes both this NOPR, but additionally other internal policies and efforts being led by Director White that I know she's been focused on and is very dedicated to continuing to move forward. But today, looking at just the NOPR, I think this is a helpful step forward, and I do agree with Mr. DeCenzo. I think it is just, from a time perspective, impossible to continue to keep. So I think it has enough here that we can move this to an ALJ to progress the rulemaking. And, you know, I think Mr. DeCenzo laid out pretty well kind of the apparatus we're trying to set up in identifying these certain types of proceedings. And, you know, I think what's critical here is, in order to really properly consider how to achieve the goals of 272, we kind of have to grapple with how the public can be more engaged at the Commission and can really understand what's going on at the Commission, how it might impact them, and what their avenues to participate and be heard really are. And so certainly it's my hope that we are making progress on that with this step to ensure, especially that our disproportionately impacted communities have a clearer line of sight to what is going on and how it impacts them and how they can be engaged to make their priorities heard to us. So yeah, with that, happy to see it moving forward and be happy to hear each of your comments.
Well, I just echo that and express my appreciation to both you and the team for moving this along and really supportive. So, Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go?
Well, I just would share that. Appreciate all the work you've put into this, Commissioner Gilman. I think you've been working on this since I got on the commission. And staff, the various staff members that have been working on this, and some which have moved on to other jobs. It's been a long process, and I appreciate the rigor with which you've addressed the issue. And I agree. I think you've created a really great baseline to move this off to ALJ and get the rules finalized. So appreciate all the work, and I would support the motion.
As would I, and unless you have anything else, Commissioner Gilman, I think that would be an ABC decision, opening the proceeding and issuing an OPR. So thanks to all. Thank you, Mr. DeCenza. Proceeding number 25D0435, CP, Alpine Taxi, Mr. DeCenzo.
Yes, I am still Mr. DeCenzo of your Commission Council. This one will be shorter. On October 15th, 2025, Alpine Taxi and Limo Incorporated filed a petition for declaratory order. Alpine seeks an order from the Commission addressing whether the Yampa Valley Regional Airport has the legal authority to bar Alpine from operating at the airport when Alpine's approved CPCN number 26246 granted the authority to do so. Alpine requests the Commission issue an order stating the airport does not have the legal authority to prevent it from picking up and dropping off passengers at the airport. While Alpine notes it is currently in a separate contract dispute with the airport, it contends the action of barring them from servicing the airport altogether is not legal. Alpine states this request is particularly important since ski season is rapidly approaching, which is a time where Alpine incurs significant costs and earns significant revenue. And I can proceed to offering a recommendation.
That'd be great.
The petition presents a controversy or uncertainty that the Commission may entertain pursuant to Rule 1304F of the Commission Rules of Practice and Procedure. Council therefore recommends the Commission accept the petition, establish a 30-day notice and intervention period, and refer the matter to an ALJ.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision, as you suggest, and referring it to an ALJ. So thank you, Mr. DeCenzo. Proceeding number 25D-V-0413EC, Mr. Riley.
Good morning, Commissioners. Nate Riley with Transportation Staff. On October 1st, 2025, the petitioner, Z3 Impact Group LLC, filed a petition for a waiver of Rule 6305, Luxury Limousine, as it pertains to a 2021 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro with approximately 81,000 miles. The waiver was requested from October 1st, 2025 through October 1st, 2027 for a period of 2 years. The petition was noticed on October 13th, 2025, and no interventions were filed opposing the waiver. In support, petitioner states that the underlying vehicle is similar to other qualified vehicles identified within the Commission's luxury four-wheel drive category, as outlined in Rule 6305A4. Petitioner also states that the vehicle serves as a functional and market equivalent, exceeding that of other premium finish four-wheel drive vehicles. Specifically, petitioner points to numerous features of the vehicle, including JBL premium audio, Toyota safety sense with blind spot monitor and rear cross traffic alert, as well as high performance shocks, skid plates, and other all-terrain features. Petitioner believes denial of the petition would be contrary to the Commission's stated intent to include equivalent four-wheel drive vehicles as qualified luxury limousine vehicles. For the underlying vehicle, petitioner submitted several photos of the interior and exterior, but did not elect to provide any additional information or documentation into the record. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I am prepared to move on to a recommendation.
Yeah, if you can give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
Thank you. It is recommended that the commission deny the petition as there does not appear to be enough justification to grant the waiver as requested. In their narrative, petitioner's primary argument appears to be the similarity of the underlying vehicle to those that would otherwise be qualified under Rule 6305A4, which describes the commission's luxury four-wheel drive category. However, this rule specifically identifies a four-wheel drive crew cab pickup as the vehicle type that is qualified under this category. The underlying vehicle is more correctly categorized as a sport utility vehicle, or SUV, as opposed to a crew cab pickup, so this is not the most comparable category. Rather, Rule 6305A2, which describes the executive car category, seems more appropriate. In addition, while the submitted photos appear to demonstrate the underlying vehicle is in a good and clean condition, there's minimal demonstration of any luxurious features befitting of a qualified luxury limousine vehicle. Furthermore, the specific features outlined in petitioner's narrative are primarily mechanical and safety related in nature, as opposed to those targeting a luxurious and comfortable passenger transportation experience. Finally, petitioner declined to explain or describe the relevant market to be served by their transportation operation, as Rule 6305B indicates should be referenced in petitions for waiver of this particular rule.
So, as always, I struggle with the definition of luxury vehicle. I probably would have found that this was fine as a vehicle, but I agree with you. The rules require that the petitioner describe the relevant market to be served, and they didn't do that. So I think that's the basis for me to deny the petition. And if they want to refile, that'd be fine with me. But Commissioner Gilman.
Agree.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree and have some of the same perspective you have, Mr. Chairman, on the vehicle being okay, but just an incomplete application.
Does that give you what you need, Mr. Riley?
Yes, I believe so. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Let's jump to the BVEM rolls 24R-0559EG. It's item 13 on the energy water agenda. Go ahead.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Nardos Xavier of your utility staff. I'm joined by Wendy Rosati of your commission counsel. I'll start with a brief background of the rulemaking and present public services exceptions. In December 2024, the Commission issued a notice of proposed rulemaking to amend the Commission's electric and gas rules. Through this rulemaking, the Commission intended to establish rules to implement and clarify Senate Bill 23-292 directives around best value employment metrics, or BVE metrics, and energy sector public works projects, or ESPW projects, while also addressing the 2022 Colorado Office of the State Auditor's audit report on the Commission's implementation of BVE metrics. The Commission referred this rulemaking to an ALJ for a recommended decision on December 24, 2024. Following several public comment hearings and filed comments, ALJ Farley issued recommended decision number R250669 on September 18, 2025. Adopting rules based on the blue line edits received from parties following the first public comment hearing in March 2025. In that public comment hearing, the Labor Coalition and Public Service agreed to work with interested stakeholders to find consensus regarding the proposed rules. In its recommended decision, the ALJ provides its analysis of why it supports the blue line changes and clarifies certain questions and comments that were raised outside of these blue line edits. The recommended decision amends the Commission's electric and gas rules. This rulemaking adopts new definition for craft labor certification, energy sector public works projects, and project labor agreements as contemplated in SB 23-292. It also adds a new rule on labor requirements and provides modifications to CPCN and ERP rules in accordance with updated BVE metrics and ESPW project requirements. In this next section, I'll discuss PSCO's exceptions and the ALJ's recommended decision. Public Service timely filed exceptions to the recommended decision. In its exceptions, Public Service states that it mostly agrees with the rules adopted by the recommended decision. as they adapt blue line changes that were proposed by many participants in this proceeding. Through these exceptions, Public Service recommends the Commission make two minor changes to the rules. First, Public Service states that Rule 3001P and 4001Y, which define ESPW projects, should be amended to remove duplicative reference to the $500,000 threshold of ratepayer funding. Although Public Service supports the definition set forth, the $500,000 threshold of ratepayer funding of ESPW projects appear in two subparts of the definition. In addition to aligning with the apparent intent of the modified proposed rules, Public Service states that limiting the $500,000 threshold to just one subpart of the definition will promote clarity. Second, Public Service asserts that Rule 3211C3 should be amended to correct inaccurate citation to a different subparagraph. Public Service states that it generally agrees with and supports the provisions of Rule 3211C3, but the provision clarifies this provision clarifies the relationship between BVE metrics and ESPW projects and certain exceptions resulting from meeting inflation reduction requirements. However, the recommended decision Rule 3211C3 cites to subparagraph 3211F2, which covers exceptions for contracts entered prior to March 1st, 2023. Public Service states that Rule 3211C3 should instead cite to subparagraph 3211F3, which covers exceptions related to the Inflation Reduction Act. With that background, I can pause here for questions or discussions. I'm also prepared to make recommendations.
If you can give us your recommendation, that'd be great.
Staff agrees with Public Service that these two minor corrections will promote clarity. Staff recommends the Commission grant Public Services exceptions and adopt the ALJ's recommended decision with the two minor changes to the rules as provided by Public Service and its exceptions.
I agree with your recommendation and just want to say I'm really pleased to see these rules come out. I think they're a very important addition for ensuring that all independent power producers play by the same rules and that we don't create a race to the bottom at the expense of labor. I'd also like to say in our order and exceptions that we intend to closely examine these BVE metrics in reviewing the projects that are ultimately selected in the Public Service Company near-term resource procurement. Going forward, beyond this procurement, I believe these rules will enhance the PUC's ability to review third-party project proposals, given the greatly expanded reporting requirements in the rules. So just want to thank everyone for getting these rules out and the unions for helping us get here. Greatly appreciate it and expect them to make a meaningful difference. Commissioner Gilman, anything you'd like to say?
No, thanks, Ms. Gabbers. We appreciate it. And Chairman, I agree with your comments and agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree as well.
Thanks. And that can be an ABC order. And if I'll send you a script, and if you can include those comments in the order, that'd be great.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back up to the top of energy. I think we'll take 24A-0547E DSP for Public Service Company last. Let's go to 25AL-0378P Phillips 66 Pipeline. Ms. Sampson. I don't see Miss Sampson. Let's keep going. 25F-0436EG, a complaint case against oh wait, sorry, I'm on the consent agenda. Sorry, my apologies. Let's go to proceeding number 22A-0230E, Black Hills, Colorado, Electric Resource Plan and Clean Energy Plan. My mistake, Mr. Eden, Mr. Sarah.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with your advisory team. Today, I'll tee up your deliberations on the guidance motion that Black Hills filed on August 29th. This guidance motion addresses the company's Clean Energy Plan, or CEP, that the Commission approved back in November 2024. The resource portfolio associated with the CEP consists of 3 projects: a 50 megawatt battery storage project that Black Hills will purchase from a developer and own and operate pursuant to a build transfer agreement, or BTA, a 200 megawatt solar facility to tie to a power purchase agreement, or PPA, and a 100 megawatt BTA solar project. In its guidance motion, Black Hills asks whether the company should continue to move forward with 2 solar projects. The company notes that the developers of both solar projects have announced significant price increases due to changes in federal law, tariffs, and the passage of time. According to Black Hills, if the company does not agree to the price changes, the developers will walk away from their respective projects. Black Hills notes that if the Commission decides that the company should not proceed with one or both of the solar projects, the company will not be able to show that its CEP will result in at least an 80% emissions reduction by 2030. Regarding the 100 megawatt BTA project, Black Hills states that to move forward with this project, the company would need the ability to argue in a CPCN proceeding that the cost to construct performance incentive mechanism, or PIM, baseline should be adjusted upward. Similarly, regarding the operations PIM for the 100 megawatt BTA, the company states that it is at an impasse with the developer regarding taking on operations risk. The company asserts it needs clarification that it can propose changes to the operations PIM in the CPCN to enable it to move forward. On September 10th, the Commission received responses from trial staff of the Commission, the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, the Colorado Energy Office, or CEO, and the Board of County Commissioners of Pueblo County. Pueblo County opposes moving forward with either solar project, arguing that the increased prices will be passed on to ratepayers who already bear unreasonably high rates. Pueblo County asks the Commission to order Public Service to walk away from the 2 solar projects because they are too expensive for Black Hills customers. Staff prefers moving forward only with the smaller 100 megawatt BTA solar project. Staff notes this option is nearly half the cost of the 200 megawatt solar project and keeps the company within striking distance of its capacity position and the 80% by 2030 emissions target. Staff opposes moving forward with both solar projects, but also opposes rejecting both solar projects. UCA's position is similar to that of staff's. UCA warns that allowing the company to pursue both of the solar projects would challenge the statutory cost reasonableness guidance. UCA further argues that the cost impacts, emissions reductions, and capacity position make the 100 megawatt BTA more attractive than the 200 megawatt PPA. In contrast, CEO supports moving forward with 2 solar projects, arguing that the Commission should allow Black Hills to meet the 80% by 2030 target, and that the Commission should resolve this issue swiftly so that the projects can still qualify for the federal clean energy tax credits. After receiving these responses, the Commission directed Black Hills to provide additional modeling and also to explain whether it has conducted any independent analysis of the net capacity factor and production estimates for the 100 megawatt BTA. On October 3rd, Black Hills filed the requested additional modeling and capacity factor analysis. In addition, Black Hills notified the Commission that the developer of the 100 megawatt BTA offered to enlarge the capacity to 200 megawatts at a more advantageous price. The additional modeling puts forth separate forecasts showing the rate impacts and total system costs of different combinations of the 2 solar projects. Forecast 3 includes both solar projects. Forecast 4 only includes the 200 megawatt PPA. Forecast 6 only includes the 100 megawatt BTA, and Forecast 5 includes neither solar project. With with both solar projects, forecast 3, the company estimates it would achieve an 82% emissions reduction and would have a capacity position of plus 7 megawatts by 2030. However, forecast 3 also has the highest system costs. With only the 200 megawatt PPA, or forecast 4, Black Hills estimates it would achieve a 79% emissions reduction and would have a capacity position of plus 4 megawatts by 2030. Forecast 4 is projected to increase residential rates by 3.1% by 2030 and about 4.4% by 2040. Pursuing only the 100 megawatt BTA, or forecast 6, is expected to achieve emissions reductions of 73% and result in a capacity position of negative 7 megawatts by 2030. Forecast 6 is projected to increase residential rates by 4% by 2030 and by about 8.5% by 2040. While the residential rate impacts of forecast 6 are generally higher than forecast 4, forecast 6 has lower total system cost according to the additional modeling. And then finally, pursuing neither solar project, which is forecast 5, only achieves 69% emissions reduction and results in a capacity position of negative 50 megawatts by 2030. However, this forecast results in the lowest bill impacts and total system costs. In the guidance motion, Black Hills also requests variances of certain rules as well as cost recovery guidance. However, I'll present those issues after the Commission has deliberated on the 2 solar projects. So at this point, I'll stop for any questions you might have or can present some options for your consideration.
Yeah, why don't you present a couple options for our consideration, and then we'll talk about it.
Sure. Advisors recommend the Commission pursue one of 2 options. The first would be to allow Black Hills to move forward with only the 200 megawatt PPA, or forecast 4. The second option is to move forward with neither solar project, forecast 5. Each option has pros and cons, which I'll try to quickly summarize. Starting with forecast 4, in which only the 200 megawatt PPA is built, the Commission could find that the 200 megawatt PPA results in significant emissions reductions, 79% by 2030, and puts Black Hills in a capacity long position. While the addition of the 200 megawatt PPA will raise residential rates between 3 to 5%, the Commission could find that the additional emissions and reliability benefits justify the rate increase. Moreover, the 100 megawatt BTA would increase residential rates even more. Although the 200 megawatt PPA generally results in a higher total cost of service than the 100 megawatt BTA, other factors still weigh in favor of the 200 megawatt PPA. To begin, advisors are concerned the 100 megawatt BTA may see additional price increases and that customers could be at risk if the project fails to perform as anticipated. For instance, if the BTA's relatively high capacity factor fails to materialize, the solar project will produce fewer production tax credits, or PTCs, and the cost that customers pay will increase. Moreover, it appears the additional modeling does not fully reflect the additional fuel savings and reductions in market purchases that the larger 200 megawatt PPA would seemingly provide. Starting in the year 2035, the additional modeling includes no costs for fuel. Because the 200 megawatt PPA should produce more fuel savings than the 100 megawatt BTA, excluding all fuel costs from the model beginning in 2035, inappropriately makes the 100 megawatt BTA look more attractive. Similarly, starting in 2035, both forecast 4 and forecast 6 have the same cost for market purchases, even though the 200 megawatt PPA should result in fewer market purchases, especially if fuel costs are held constant. Analyzing the cost on a net present value, or NPV, basis shows that forecast 5 has the lowest NPV of any forecast. Forecast 6, with the 100 megawatt BTA, has the second lowest NPV of about $3.42 billion. Forecast 4, with the 200 megawatt PPA, has an NPV of about $3.44 billion. This equates to only about a 0.65% increase. Given the other factors I discussed, the modeling concerns, the additional emissions reductions, the stronger capacity position, advisors still favor selecting forecast 4 over forecast 6 even though forecast 4 is 0.65% more expensive on an NPV basis. Similarly, advisors still prefer the 200 megawatt PPA to the potential enlargement of the 100 megawatt BTA. The evidence regarding the price of the 200 megawatt BTA is thin, and Black Hills notes that it is unsure whether the updated price is cost competitive after considering transmission interconnection costs. The second option advisors recommend the Commission consider is Forecast 5, in which Black Hills only moves forward with the previously approved 50 megawatt storage facility. The cost advantages of Forecast 5 are clear. Compared to either Forecast 4 or Forecast 6, the residential bills under Forecast 5 are estimated to be about 3 to 9% lower, depending on the year. On an NPV basis, Forecast 5 is approximately $148 million less expensive, or about 4.5% lower. Proceeding with Forecast 5 aligns with Pueblo County's position, which argues that ratepayers already bear unreasonably high rates. However, Black Hills projects that moving forward with neither solar project would create a capacity shortfall of about 50 megawatts. It's unclear if the additional modeling accounts for this shortfall with additional market purchases. Another drawback associated with Forecast 5 is the estimated higher emissions. Black Hills estimates that without either solar project, it would only achieve a 69% emissions reduction by 2030. It is unclear the extent to which the additional modeling fully considers Black Hills' ability to purchase some of the growing amount of solar energy on public services system. So here I'll pause for your vote on which pathway to pursue, unless you have any questions.
Commissioner Gilman, questions, comments? What are you thinking?
No real questions, Mr. Eden. Thanks for the comprehensive rundown. Very curious to hear where each of you are at, but I'm certainly leaning toward the 200 megawatt PPA for many of the reasons Mr. Eden articulated, but also a really significant concern about resource adequacy, especially with where we might be going for future pricing in terms of adding more resources even in the future to solve that gap. We've got evidence in this proceeding that the company does not have sufficient capacity to meet its loads, which is concerning now and into the future. And if we certainly consider kind of the policy situation around what we expect for future pricing of renewables, I think it's very unlikely that we expect the pricing situation to get better. And eventually you have to deal with this capacity shortfall. So if we simply accept no resources here and allow that to continue, at some point you've got to build them. And I think every assumption right now is they will be more expensive in the future due to largely the changes in federal policy. So while I'm certainly not thrilled in any respect about the rate impacts of this, I think we have to face the reality that more capacity is required, and it's got to be acquired now or later. And to me, the real question is it really going to be cheaper later? I don't think there's anything to suggest that. I would certainly favor the 200 megawatt over the 100 megawatt for several of the reasons Mr. Eden indicated. Especially considering, there was analysis in the record really questioning a lot of the performance and capacity values identified for the 100 megawatt BTA, which causes me concern that we'll be putting increased risk on ratepayers for potential underperformance of that asset. So that, along with several other reasons, would lead me to favor the 200 megawatt BPA.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, thanks. I think Commissioner Gilman hit on almost all of my reasons for supporting the 200 as well. The only additional thing I'd add is I think that the costs of the 100 and the 200 kind of track pretty equally going out, and then there's a huge bump up with the 100 as it moves away, to a BTA, and the PPA keeps a steady price out into the future. And so, that was another factor, but all the issues that Commissioner Gilman identified were also really point me towards towards approving the 200 megawatt.
I think I agree as well. I'm really sympathetic to the community's bill and rate impact concerns and have struggled with this decision. At the end of the day, however, I agree with you both. And if natural gas prices go up, the project may well prove to be economic. This offtake agreement also meets, as Commissioner Gilman said, the company's capacity need, and also likely allows the company to apply for the GHG emissions reduction safe harbor, which, as I understand it, has a 75% reduction floor. Finally, on this record, as again, Commissioner Gilman and Mr. Eden said, I'm concerned that the solar costs may go up even further. Solar and alternatives may go up even further. So this is the best we can do. Regarding the utility BTA, I agree with advisors and you both that it is more expensive based on residential rate impacts. While the BTA has a slightly lower MPV capacity, emission reduction, and risk issues all make the 200 megawatt PPA the better choice for me. Given that neither Black Hills nor the developer of the BTA are willing to bear the risk that the solar project doesn't perform as well as expected. Plus, everything we saw on this record with the problems of the Peakview wind farm make the PPA look more attractive to me. So I think that gives you what you need, Mr. Eden, on the underlying resource decision. You want to jump to the waivers?
Yes. In the guidance motion, Black Hills also seeks an extension of the deadline to propose the public release of confidential information pursuant to Rule 3613J, as well as an extension of time to finalize contracts under Rule 3613I. Regarding Rule 3613I, the current deadline to execute contracts for potential resources is September 4th. Black Hills requests an extension until November 4th. For Rule 3613J, Black Hills argues the current pricing information remains highly sensitive. The company proposes that upon completion of contracting for all PPA and BTA projects, the company would file within 2 weeks a motion to set a deadline for the Rule 3613J public filing. In its response to the guidance motion, staff expressly states that it does not oppose either of the company's variance requests. Would you like a recommendation on this point?
Please.
Advisors recommend granting the requested variances with modifications. Considering Black Hills filed the guidance motion on August 29th, advisors fear extending the deadline under Rule 3613I to November 4th may not give the company enough time to execute the remaining contract. Instead, advisors recommend setting a deadline of December 1st, 2025. Advisors also recommend granting the company's request regarding Rule 3613J. Doing so would require Black Hills to file a proposal for the public release of confidential bid information within 2 weeks after the completion of contracting.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I also agree.
As do I.
Great. Regarding cost recovery, if one or both of the solar projects are not pursued, Black Hills also asks that the Commission provide guidance as to how this may affect cost recovery of the 50 megawatt battery project and any remaining CEP project. The company notes that it may need to modify the CEP rider that is currently set at 1.5%. Black Hills also notes that it is exploring using the Renewable Energy Standard Adjustment, or RESA surplus, to help offset the cost increases, potentially bringing the overall cost of the 100 megawatt BTA project back down to the original price. The company notes its current RESA surplus is about $27 million. Staff argues Black Hills' request for cost recovery guidance is premature. Instead, staff recommends the Commission first determine whether to move forward with the solar projects. After this determination, staff recommends Black Hills file an advice letter requesting an amendment to its CEP rider accompanied by pre-filed testimony justifying the modifications. Staff similarly argues it would be premature for the Commission to direct the use of the RESA surplus to offset the cost increases. Staff recommends the Commission require the company to wait until a future ERP or RES proceeding to pursue using the RISA surplus. Would you like a recommendation on this one as well?
Yeah, although I sort of like using the reason to buy down the rate impacts. So, but yeah, why don't you give the recommendation?
Advisors agree with staff that providing guidance on either modification to the CEP rider or using the RISA surplus would be premature. For purposes of this guidance motion, there is almost no record associated with the CEP rider or the RISA surplus. Advisors recommend requiring Black Hills to file within 180 days of a final commission decision or after the resolution of any RRR, an advice letter with pre-filed testimony requesting an amendment to the CEP rider. Commission should also clarify that if the company wishes to pursue using surplus RISA funds, it must propose doing so in a future ERP or RES proceeding.
Could we do the use of the RISA funds in that 180-day filing? It sounds like the RISA funds would knock off maybe a third of the rate increase.
Yeah, that might be an option. I think staff's main concern, which I agree with, is the insufficient record right now to evaluate what impacts it would have. But if the commission and parties were able to evaluate that in a future proceeding, that might be acceptable.
Well, if we could buy down the rate impacts, I would love it. So, any concerns, Mr. Eden, if we ask for that in the filing 180 days after this decision in this order?
No, I think that should work. So in the 180 days advice letter filing on the CEP rider, they would also file a proposal and pre-file testimony justifying using the RISA surplus to offset the cost increases of I guess either the 200 megawatt PPA or the potentially the 50 megawatt BTA. In their guidance motion, they only really request the ability to use the RISA surplus for the 100 megawatt BTA. So I'm unclear if there would be an issue somehow using the RISA surplus for the PPA project.
Well, can we just ask for them to explore using the RISA I'm just trying to do the math in my head. I think there might be enough RISA money that we could eliminate any adverse rate impact for 4 or 5 years, which I would love to do. So can we ask for that to be filed as part of that 180-day filing? So basically, the solar facility wouldn't have any adverse rate impact. I mean, I'm just doing the math in my head right now, but I think we could eliminate the rate impact for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think we could direct the company to include that proposal with their advice letter filing addressing the CEP rider.
Commissioner Gilman, would you be all right with that? That would address my single biggest concern with this. It would give basically 5 years of rate stability. It would meet the capacity thing. It would allow for us to hit the statutory target, and I don't think there'd be very much rate impact, if any, for 5 years.
Yeah, I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I agree as well.
Does that give you what you need on this one, Mr. Eden?
Yes. Thank you.
And hang on for a sec. Commissioner Gilman, are you all right with this being an ABC order, or do you want to say it?
ABC's fine.
Commissioner Plant?
Yep, that's fine with me.
So Mr. Eden, that could be an ABC order.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next one I want to take up is the Black Hills DSP. It's 25A0062E, and I'm hoping that whoever from the community served by Black Hills are still listening, because want to make them aware of what's going on. As background for my comments today, Black Hills filed its 2025-2029 distribution system plan on January 31st, 2025, and I was subsequently designated hearing commissioner. A partial settlement agreement was reached between the parties in this proceeding involving Black Hills, trial staff, and UCA that resolved the parties' concerns except for one waiver request. The recommended decision addressing the settlement agreement and the remaining waiver request was issued on October 22nd. We're still in the middle of exceptions, which are due November 12th. Because of that, I don't intend to start a conversation today that would be part of any decision in this proceeding. Rather, I just want to highlight some statements I made in the recommended decision regarding distribution capital spending to ensure that the Black Hills customer community is aware of the potential bill and rate packs of this planned distribution capital spending. More broadly, I agreed to be hearing commissioner in this case because I was concerned about the potential bill and rate impacts of the company's distribution capital spending plans and thought that this was the only proceeding to better understand and potentially influence those plans. More specifically, the record in this case shows that the company is proposing an almost 80% increase in distribution capital spending. In the 4 years from 2020 to 2023, Black Hills distribution capital spending averaged $27.4 million. Going forward in this DSP, the company is now proposing to spend an average of $48 million over the 3 years, $48 million per year during each of the 3 years from 2026 to 2028, or again, an almost 80% increase in average annual distribution capital spending as compared to historical levels. Although there was somewhat unclear about the causes of the capital spending growth, there is less uncertainty about the projected bill and rate impacts. In the company's base case financial model, the recommended decision, and it's still subject to RRR by the company and others, so this might change, found that this incremental capital spending by itself results in projected electric bills that are 5% higher and base rates that are 8% higher by 2029 as compared to 2025 levels. When combined with the company's other capital spending plans, average monthly residential bills are expected to be over 26% higher and base rates roughly 50% higher in 2029 as compared to 2025 levels, although that calculation was prior to the outcome of the ERP decision we just made, so both those numbers should come down. Although the net impact associated with the distribution capital spending increase being proposed in this case appears to be the single largest driver of future bill and rate impacts, it seems that the local communities that will pay for this, some of the poorest in the state in terms of average incomes, were never really presented with the increase in the distribution capital spending budgets when the company presented its filing to the community. Moreover, the rate and bill impact modeling is confidentiality protected so that customers can't access the model without intervening in the case. The primary comment made by the local community when made aware of the general filing was concern over high prices and the desire to maintain rate stability. Before and during the evidentiary hearing in this proceeding to try and adjust this projected bill and rate impact concern, I discussed with the parties the concept of setting a maximum level of capital spending that would carry associated prudency presumptions, including potentially a presumption of imprudency if the spending exceeds the cap. Although this commission routinely scrutinizes utility capital spending plans for generation and individual transmission projects, or at least larger ones, the parties that addressed this concept were united in their desire not to do this with ordinary course distribution capital spending for multiple reasons. As such, there is no record in this case to meaningfully cap or reduce distribution capital spending. Given the potential rate and bill impacts, the recommended decision did not grant any presumption of prudence to the proposed capital spending levels. At the same time, however, there is likely no other regulatory opportunity to review or alter this distribution capital spending until it is incurred in the context of a future rate case. Under these circumstances, the recommended decision was provided to the entities in the Black Hills customer community that have been active in past PUC proceedings. I also wanted to present these findings at a CWM today's to make sure that the Black Hills customer community is at least aware that they're likely facing substantial bill and rate impacts, in part because of the company's proposed increase in distribution capital spending in this case, and just how it trades off with reliability benefits. Finally, I do want to express my appreciation to the company for helping develop a rate impact model that could help quantify these relationships, both in this case and the prior one. For me, it's essential for us to do our job. So that's really it. Again, my goal here is to inform the Black Hills community about the potential bill and rate impacts of this distribution capital spending. As such, I'd prefer not to start a substantive discussion on these issues now because of where we are in the exceptions process. So really, thanks for letting me highlight these concerns, and stay tuned as these issues may come before us in a future CWN. The last thing I'd say is, there's real challenges to how this commission reviews ordinary course, whether it's distribution or gas pipeline safety investments, and how we get a handle on that spending and how we trade off affordability concerns with reliability and other concerns. So unless you guys have anything, a burning desire to add, we'll see if the community, the customer community, has anything they want to say. But I think this is the single largest driver of distribution capital spending, is the single largest driver. So anything you feel compelled to say without engaging the substance, Commissioner Gilman?
No, I certainly have questions, but now is not the time. But appreciate your work on it and your willingness to bring this forward more publicly, to just ensure there's more awareness about where we are in this process and what the actual options are or aren't going forward.
Thanks. I don't know if you have anything to say, Commissioner.
Yeah,
Plant.
no, I just say the same. I really appreciate your work on this and your commitment to trying to mitigate the rate impacts as much as you can, and the transparency of bringing this out to the public for understanding and help people understand sort of the dynamics that are driving a lot of this stuff. And I haven't read your recommended decision yet, but I'm looking forward
And
to
you don't need to. You can wait till exceptions. But hopefully the community reads it, and if they have any comments, I'd very much welcome it. So with that, we're going to skip the PSCO distribution plan to the end, and I think we're on 25AL-0343E. Dr. Bongiardina, Mr. Haglin, advice letter filing on net metering and time of use rights.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Nick Bongiardino with your commission staff. On August 15th, 2025, Public Service filed advice letter 1986 to update its net metering service tariff in accordance with decision number C250415 in the company's time of use, or TOU, proceeding to go into effect on October 1st of 2025. The company then filed an amended advice letter to delay the effective date to November 1st of 2025 to allow more time for the company to implement its new TOU rates. There are several changes to the net metering tariff to account for these new time of use rates. First, when customers are converted to the new rates, some customers that have elected for the cash out option under this tariff will have unused shoulder kilowatt hour credits. The company proposes performing a one-time conversion of the shoulder credits to off-peak kilowatt hour credits under the new rates, using a conversion factor that maintains the value of the customer's shoulder credits at the end of their October 2025 billing cycles. The company will also remove the shoulder language from the tariff, leaving only the on-peak and off-peak periods that were approved in the time of use case going forward. And if approved, these changes, as I said, will go into effect on November 1st when the new time of use rates go into effect. I can pause here for any questions, or I can provide a recommendation.
I think we'd welcome a recommendation.
I recommend that the commission take no action and allow this advice letter to go into effect by operation of law.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Proceeding number 25AL-0405G. Ms. Ramos.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Mary Ann Ramos, and I'm an engineer on the Commission staff. On 9/26/2025, Rocky Mountain Natural Gas, or RMNG, filed advice letter number 138, seeking approval for a new 2026 annual reimbursement rate of 1.6% for fuel lost and unaccounted for gas called FLNU gas, which would replace the 2025 FLNU rate of 0.71%. This new volumetric rate would be uniformly assessed to the 4 large shippers on the RMNG system from November 1st, 2025 through October 31st, 2026. There were no interveners in this matter. FLNU volumes largely represent an amalgamation of intangibles like transfer meter inaccuracies, customer theft, and small accounting true-ups. But FLNU volumes also include quantifiable items like company fuel usage, small leaks in facilities, and pipeline blowdowns necessitated by scheduled maintenance activities or unexpected operational actions. FLNU calculations vary from year to year due to changes in operation and maintenance activities and system pressures that affect leakage rates. Higher annual transportation system receipts require higher system pressures for longer periods of time, which ultimately result in larger FLNU leakage volumes. RMNG's 2026 FLNU annual reporting quantifies the FLNU greenhouse gas impact on its system from June 2024 to May 2025 to be as follows. Total system receipt volumes were roughly 14.6 million decatherms. The total estimated FLNU volumes were 240,000 decatherms. 109,000 decatherms were burned as part of normal system operations. There were 133,000 decatherms that were unmeasurable losses, and the actual methane release during maintenance blowdowns was only 158 decatherms. I am prepared to answer questions, or I can make a recommendation if you want me to.
We'd welcome a recommendation.
Okay. Under normal operating condition, FLNU values under 2% of total transmission receipt volumes are generally considered acceptables. RMNG's requested 2026 FLNU rate of 1.66% is well under this thumbnail value. It is therefore recommended that the Commission allow the new 2026 rate to go into effect by operation of law.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I. Thank you, Ms. Ramos.
Thank you.
25A-0036E, Public Service Company of Colorado approval of its tariff on-bill financing program. And just so you know, Commissioner Plant, I'm not prepared to vote between the hearings and everything else. I'm going to need another week to prepare. But Mr. Davis, Commissioner Plant, whatever you'd like to present or talk about, now would be the time, and as long as we can vote next week.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the tariff on bill finance program that came out of last year's DSM program, and you know, it was a complicated program, but not as bad as it could have been, because the program that Excel proposed is, mostly similar to what already exists within the tri-state program. They're using the same CCEF financing entity. It's collecting and paying back those loans, on the bill. So a lot of that, so a lot of the details of that in terms of how the financing would work was already pretty much established. One of the difficulties of the proceeding was that we had a lot of really great interveners and a lot of people who participated in the process and brought a number of thoughtful ideas as well as best practices from the hundreds of different on-bill finance structures from around the country. But because CCEF wasn't a party to the proceeding, we couldn't see how those innovative approaches or best practices in different areas might impact the loan process here. And so there's the other sort of complicating factor is that there isn't a final agreement between Public Service and CCEF. They were waiting until the proceeding was done so that they could try and negotiate their final agreement with CCEF based on what our decision is. And that's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, we want to make sure that the commission decision is implemented in any on-bill finance program. On the other hand, once it leaves our hands, it's kind of out of our hands. And if they can't resolve certain issues with CCEF, there is the risk that the whole thing just blows up. So tried to balance all these various different issues in the decision. I think, to a large extent, we came out with what amounts to a good sort of initial launch of the program. One of the things that makes me optimistic is that the company is going to submit with the consolidated filing next summer, sort of how the on-bill finance program might integrate with all those various different rebate programs. And we'll have an opportunity at that time to really dive more into some of these innovative approaches and ways in which we can integrate the financing with the specific programs within DSM and BE. But I think probably the biggest issues around that were brought up both in exceptions and also in the discussion that we had were some of the details around, for example, what's the limit in the amount that people would be able to finance. The minimum is 1,500, but there were different opinions on what would be on the upper limit of financing. We wanted to make sure that we could accommodate things that really are difficult for most people to be able to afford out of pocket. Things like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and things that can really tax an individual's out of pocket spend, and where financing would really give an opportunity while also looking at those as components of a larger program that could combine incentives to invest in envelope efficiency and things of that nature at the same time that they're upgrading their heating system that could have compounding and sort of force multiplier benefits. So I think the company came in with an initial proposal of $75,000 as a cap. Staff was on the low end with $15,000. Most of the parties ended up at about $50,000. I think UCA was suggesting 25. And the final decision went with the $50,000 cap level. One of the things that, all these things are kind of integrated in how they impact each other. And one of the real concerns among most of the parties was that at this point, the company is saying that they would apply rebates after financing. And that is problematic in that, particularly for low-income customers, a lot of the upfront costs can be defrayed by the rebates. And so that if you're financing that after rebate component, your monthly costs can be greatly lowered. And if you're taking, the full amount, even though you're reducing the term of that loan, your monthly payment would be increased by not having that application of rebates up front. So, and I thought about that issue in conjunction with a variety of other aspects of the program. One being that cap. Could you possibly lower the cap if you were able to apply the rebates ahead of time because you just overall lower what the cost was to be financed? And I think you could. And I opined in the decision that I think if they could get the rebates applied prior, then lowering that cap down to 30,000 would really be able to accommodate things like heat pump water heaters, insulation, combined project financing. Um, uh, and so you could, serve more people basically by lowering that cap, but without applying the rebate first, it kind of drives up that financed amount. Another issue is um, something that was proposed during the proceeding was how to lower interest rates off the bat and, provide credit enhancements that might lower the overall rate that's being charged. Um, and one of the thoughts was allowing the company to establish a regulatory asset that could cover defaults that might occur, and that would really provide a credit enhancement to CCF, be able to lower overall rates by a certain amount. But of course, because CCF wasn't a party to the case, we couldn't really figure out what that impact would be overall and whether or not it was worth the risk. And then my other concern around that is that by not applying the rebates up front, you're, artificially increasing those monthly payments. And so, you could, by doing that, potentially increase the rate of default as well. And so until those issues get resolved, then, establishing that regulatory asset maybe isn't the best approach, at least for the initial launch of the program. Um, and there's a variety of other issues that, we talked about through this. I think that one of the things that, really came out of the initial launch of this was um, the idea of different objectives that we might have as it gets integrated into the combined filing next summer. And, there's a list of sort of objectives and approaches that the decision contemplates for that filing. And I'm happy to go into detail on any of the other issues if you had any other questions about that, but I just wanted to give you kind of an introduction into it. One of the other things that was also an issue that came up in exceptions was the overall cap on the program in terms of total funding. CCEF right now has available $10 million for the launch of the program. Uh, PSCO thinks that they might be able to expand that to 25 million. There's also potential of a grant fund that's currently under litigation, and we don't know what the ultimate impact of that will be. I know that the legislature is looking at opportunities to expand the money that might be available through the loan program. So there's a great uncertainty in what the level of potential funding that would be available is. And so what the decision does is it authorizes the launch of the program with the $10 million corpus that they already have. And then if future funding during this cycle becomes available, then they could apply to expand that base of funding through the 60, 90-day process up to $100 million.
Well, I just appreciate all your leadership on this, and thanks for the overview today. I think it'll help me prepare and gives me a sense of what to focus on. So greatly appreciate it. Commissioner Gilman, maybe we can keep the substance again till next week, but anywhere you'd like to go. Questions,
Sure.
comments?
Yeah, no, thanks for the introduction, Commissioner Plant, and I've been reading some of it and looking at some of what we'll go over next week. So I'll be very interested to hear your perspectives on that, but really appreciate you ushering that one through. And clearly, I think a really great opportunity and program for us to see, especially the expansion of offerings, particularly for those things, as you mentioned, that are pretty expensive and difficult for individuals to afford, especially lower income individuals, to ensure that really more of the customer base has access to different energy saving technologies. So yeah, I'll be excited to dig into the details next week, but appreciate your work on the details and all the time that's come before.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else, Commissioner Plant?
Nope.
Thanks. Thanks again. I think number 6 we'll take up at the end. We did number 7. Number 8, 25A 0354E, Elbert County, Ms. Harper, Ms. Dundas. Ain't getting any sleep, Ms. Dundas. You're on everything.
I am very popular around here. Good morning. So I don't remember honestly if you said Albert or El Paso, but I'm going to do both together. So let's start with El Paso. And for discussion today is a little bit of follow-up from the pre-hearing conference that we held on October 22nd in the El Paso siting appeal. As you recall, this proceeding is an application addressing public services request that the commission issue an order authorizing the company to begin construction of segment 5 of its Colorado Power Pathways project along the proposed route within El Paso County. Staff, CEO, COSA, and El Paso County are all parties to this proceeding. And on October 15th, the company filed a consensus procedural schedule for this proceeding that requests a February 5th and 6th en banc evidentiary hearing and requests a decision by April 3rd, as well as sets a deadline for answer testimony, rebuttal testimony, settlement, and a cross-examination matrix. So the first decision point today is whether to adopt that consensus procedural schedule and schedule an en banc remote evidentiary hearing for February 5th and 6th for El Paso County.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I agree.
Commissioner Plant? I agree as well. I don't know if Commissioner Plant's having computer problems.
I'll go through the next part of the spiel.
There he is.
Okay.
I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. There you go. And do you have more, or do you want that to be an ABC decision?
A little bit more, and then I'll go to Albert.
Keep going.
The second matter is when to schedule the public comment hearing required by Rule 3705 and Colorado Statute 2920-1085B. On October 13th, El Paso County informed the commission that its preferred location is Swing Call in Calhoun, Colorado. At the pre-hearing conference, the county indicated that its preference is for the commission to hold an in-person afternoon hearing with an approximate 2-hour duration for public comment. Commission staffs worked with the county to find a suitable date. And after reviewing your schedules, we suggest scheduling a public comment hearing to be held on January 26, 2026 from 5 to 7 p.m. at Swink Hall. Also pursuant to Rule 37OG, the utility is to give notice of the public hearing to identified individuals in a manner specified by the commission. And while the company's proposal was discussed at the pre-hearing conference, I suggest that the commission require the company to file a consensus report regarding its notice proposal no later than November 3rd. So the commission can address how to best notice the public comment hearing in a future CWM.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Platt,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thanks, Chair. Second proceeding is the Elbert County land citing appeal. Again, this is mostly follow-up from the pre-hearing conference held on 10/22. Staff, CEO, COSA, and Bar E Ranch, as well as Elbert County, are parties to this proceeding. On October 15th, the company filed a consensus procedural schedule for this proceeding that requests the February 19th and 20th en banc evidentiary hearing and requests a decision by April 17th, as well as sets deadlines for answer and rebuttal testimony, settlements, and a cross-examination matrix. So the first decision point is whether to adopt that consensus procedural schedule and schedule an remote en banc evidentiary hearing for February 19th and 20th, 2026.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Platt,
I agree.
as do I.
Thank you, Chair. And then last decision is whether to or when to schedule the public comment hearing required by Rule 3705D and 2920-1085B. On October 13th, Elbert County informed us that their preferred location for the public comment hearing is the Agriculture Building at the Elbert County Fairgrounds in Kiowa. At the pre-hearing conference, the county indicated again that its preference is an afternoon hearing with a 2-hour duration or so. Commission staff has worked with the county to find a suitable date, and after reviewing your schedules, we suggest a public comment hearing to be held on December 9th, 2025 from 5 to 7 p.m. in Kiowa at the requested location. And then again, pursuant to Rule 3705G, the utility is supposed to give notice to the public of the public hearing in a manner specified by the commission, and that proposal was discussed at the pre-hearing conference, but I suggest you also require the company in this proceeding to file that proposal by November 3rd so we can address it at a future CWM.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Platt,
I agree.
as do I.
Thank you.
And is there anything else, or is that it?
That's it.
Can you just make sure those, I mean, I tried to reserve it on my calendar. Can you just make sure the hearing and the public comment hearings get on our calendar?
Yes, those will go on the public calendar as well as your internal calendars today.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Ms. Dundas, what's next? Number 10, 25A-0385W, Cascade New Vision. Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff. Cascade New Vision has filed an application for simplified regulatory treatment for the water and sewer services it provides to customers, with rate-making elements that tie to such simplified treatment, and for authority to implement an immediate rate increase. Cascade states that it qualifies for simplified regulatory treatment for water utilities under the Commission's rules because it's small, privately owned, and has fewer than 1,500 customers. Cascade serves customers just north of Durango, and as background, Cascade acquired what was formerly called Grizzly Peak Water Sales and Distribution, and the current tariff was set for Grizzly Peak, and it is what Cascade now provides service under, and that tariff became effective in 2012, or roughly 13 years ago. Cascade seeks to provide service using the annual rate adjustment option in the Commission's rules, and it also seeks to use a major capital improvement reserve option. They're, again, available to small qualifying water utilities. When establishing the annual rate adjustment, Cascade seeks to increase the fixed fee for water service to $137.78 per month, and to increase the fixed rate for sewer service to $45.57 per month. Cascade does not have a metered system, and so it charges a flat fee for both services. Cascade also seeks approval of what is called a reserve account for major capital improvements. Cascade needs to comply with state health department requirements for upgrades to its existing system It also expects to incur additional expenses as a result of the federal EPA's PFAS standards, and Cascade further claims that funds will be required simply to maintain the system. Cascade proposes to implement a monthly per customer surcharge of $18 to be deposited into a capital improvement fund, and that surcharge would apply to all customer accounts. Staff of the commission filed an intervention of right and asked for a hearing. Staff seeks to examine whether this application complies with the PUC's requirement for simplified regulatory treatment and whether the proposed rates and costs comport with the public interest. And in addition, Cascade Village Condominium Association has also filed an intervention and similarly requests a hearing. The association states that Cascade must provide its cost of service, but it has not, and it further faults the application filing for failing to provide sufficient evidence and support for Cascade's requested relief. And finally, several of Cascade's customers have filed individual comments already into the proceeding. The general sentiments in these comments are that the current rates are already too high, a rate increase is not justified, and that flat monthly rate design is flawed. There is also a shared concern that the project improvements will be paid for by existing customers, but that the true beneficiaries of this work will be new customers because of new development in the area. So the decision point for you this morning is whether to deem the application complete and set the matter for hearing. And I recommend the commission deem the application complete and refer the matter to an administrative law judge by minute entry.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I. And I guess we're going to do that by minute entry, right, Mr. Davis?
That's correct. Thank you.
Thanks. Temporary rules on pipeline operators and gas pipeline safety. Ms. Rosati, you got a couple, so any order you'd like.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the temporary rules first. Good morning. I'm Wendy Rosati of your Commission Counsel. Casey Hensley of your Pipeline Safety Program staff is also available for questions. House Bill 25-1280, enacted April 30th, 2025, made changes to Section 40-2-115, subsection 1G, and required the Commission to, quote, adopt rules related to pipeline safety and repair and the use of advanced leak detection technology in accordance with subsection 1D, Roman numeral 2E, end quote, on or before November 1st, 2025. The permanent rulemaking to implement this requirement, proceeding number 25R0280 GPS, is ongoing. The recommended decision was issued on October 15th, and exceptions are due on November 4th. If the Commission waits until the permanent rules are in place, the Commission will fail to timely implement House Bill 25-1280 and will be out of compliance with current state law regarding use of advanced leak detection technology and repair requirements. Therefore, we recommend the Commission find that immediate adoption of temporary rules implementing this statute is imperatively necessary to ensure the Commission adopts rules related to pipeline safety and repair and the use of advanced leak detection technology in accordance with the statutory requirements on or before November 1st. And further, that compliance with the requirements to complete a permanent rulemaking would be contrary to the public interest. The temporary rules would be the ALJ's adopted rules from the permanent rulemaking regarding leak surveys and pipeline repair timelines. At a high level, the temporary rules would require more frequent leak surveys and, starting January 1st, 2027, would require operators to classify leaks differently and repair leaks on a shorter timeline. In accordance with Section 40-2-108, subsection 2, these temporary rules would be effective for 210 days from the effective date of this decision or until the Commission issues permanent rules in this matter, whichever period is less. Temporary rules here would be a short-term measure to meet the statutory deadline. Adoption of these rules would not impact the permanent rulemaking and would not prevent parties from filing exceptions in the permanent rulemaking proceeding. With that, I can pause for your vote or any discussion.
Commissioner Gilman,
Thanks, Mr. Rosati. I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
Thank you. And can that be an ABC decision?
It can.
Thanks. I will turn to the next proceeding. I believe this one is 25M-0026 GPS. On June 20th, 2025, Public Service Company of Colorado, Black Hills Colorado Gas, Atmos Energy Corporation, and Colorado Natural Gas jointly filed a petition seeking a declaratory order pursuant to Rule 1304F of the Commission's Rules of Practice and Procedure. The petition seeks clarification regarding the scale at which joint petitioners' GIS pipeline data attributes will be displayed and made available to the public under Commission Rule 11100C, Roman numeral 3A. The Commission accepted the petition through decision number C25-I through a decision issued July 18th, 2025, and set a notice and comment period. The joint petitioners explain that through proceeding number 22R-0491 GPS, the Commission adopted the rule at issue that implements section 40-2-115, subsection D, Roman numeral 2C, and requires the development of an online GIS map viewer that uses pipeline operators' GIS data. The joint petitioners state the Commission determined that the 1 to the 6,000th scale for the presentation of a utility's GIS data is consistent with the scale used by other state agencies and is consistent with the intent of the proposed rules, but also allowed that any data provided confidentially must be filed with a publicly accessible version at a scale greater than or equal to 1 to the 24,000th. The joint petitioners state that as they began to coordinate with Commission staff to get the map viewer published, operators became concerned that certain pipeline data designated by the operators as confidential would be displayed at a scale less than 1 to the 24,000th. Additionally, section 40-2-115, subsection D, Roman numeral 2C, references a regulation of the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission that does not expressly allow for confidentially filed data. Citing safety and security concerns, the joint petitioners filed the petition for declaratory order to obtain clarity regarding the scale at which the confidential data will be displayed. A comment was filed by ECMC, which states it regulates a different piece of the pipeline system with different safety and security concerns, and that the pipeline operators regulated by the PUC have distinct federal requirements and different safety and security risks that must be considered in addition to information transparency. With that background, I am prepared to make a recommendation.
That'd be great.
Given ECMC's comments and the joint petitioner's safety and security concerns, in addition to the original intent of the Commission's rule to allow the confidential filing of pipeline data, we recommend granting the petition for declaratory order and clarifying that Pipeline Safety Program staff preparing the online map viewer will ensure that operators' pipeline data will be displayed at a scale of 1 to the 24,000th or greater if that pipeline data is designated as confidential under the Commission's rules.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I. And if that's it, it can be an ABC order. Does that give you what you need?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's it for the normal agenda. Now I think we'll turn to the deliberation in the Public Service Company DSP. But before we do, why don't we take a break and come back at 10:40. So 10:40. All right, Public Service Company of Colorado Distribution System Plan 24A-0547 E and the BPP one, which I'm looking for 25A-00620. Mr. Mendelson, Mr. Greenberg, lead us forward.
Thanks, Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mike Mendelson, your advisory team. I'll just a little preamble that we'll be taking up matters related to non-traditional resources, including 2 settlements filed in the consolidated proceeding related to non-wires alternatives and virtual power plants. We could stop there or continue with hosting capacity data issues or other matters, depending on how long you would like to go today. I'll also note that a commissioner's deliberation meeting, or CDM, has been scheduled for tomorrow morning from 9 to 12 through today's consent agenda. So we'll pick up where we leave off today there. And then with that, I'll pass it to Mr. Greenberg to get us started.
Yeah, before just so I have a hard stop around 12:40. I have a doctor's thing I got to go to by 1, and I got to drive over. Commissioner Gilman, preferences, thoughts on when we stop? How far you want to go?
Yeah, I certainly think doing the non-traditional resources, perhaps the first like item or 2 in HCA, and then I think we can pick up the rest tomorrow. But or you want an exact time?
Okay. Yeah,
I mean, I
I'm
don't
just
have a
asking.
time deadline, so I've got no issue with yours or earlier if we get through those items for today.
Okay. Commissioner Plan, any personal restrictions? Maybe we'll try and end around noon, 12:15. But
Yeah,
okay.
that works.
Mr. Greenberg, take us away.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Okay, the first area we'll discuss is flexible interconnection, or FI, and the issue of whether the company is in compliance with statutory requirements and whether it should be required to implement forms of FI that do not require a grid DER management system, or DERMS. In response to party contentions that the company is out of compliance with SB 24-218 FI provisions, the company emphasizes that the statute allows it to file either a tariff or a phased interconnection or energization agreement, and claims that it has done just that in its renewable energy plan proceeding, so it is in compliance. The company contends that the RES plan proceeding is the place to consider the relative merits of a tariff or phased interconnection agreement. The company also refers to several FI demonstration projects it is planning or already engaged in. ACE, Tesla, and IREC all counter the company's claim of being in compliance by pointing to the fact that paragraph 2U of statute section 40-2-132.5 defines the term phased interconnection or energization agreement as, quote, an agreement between a qualifying retail utility and a customer to provide certain levels of electrical service capacity on a guaranteed timeline in exchange for the customer participating in the qualifying retail utility's flexible interconnection or energization tariff, while necessary grid upgrades are being completed, end quote. These parties argue that since no flexible interconnection tariff has been filed, the company is out of compliance. They also note that the FI terms the company filed in its RES plan apply solely to front of meter generation, excluding most types of DERs and load, and thereby limiting the ability of FI to delay or eliminate distribution capacity investments. Tesla argues that it is time for the company to stop studying FI and start offering it. ACE contends that the company's failure to offer a concrete tariff or pilot runs counter to its 2022 DSP settlement commitments and to SB 24-218. ACE asks the Commission to direct the company to file an FI tariff within 60 days of a final decision in this proceeding. In connection with this, ACE asks the Commission to require the company to facilitate a stakeholder process prior to the filing of the FI tariff, make several recommendations regarding the content of the tariff, reporting on the impacts of the tariff, and finally ask the Commission to require the company to implement a pilot program in 2026 to test FI with at least 3 third-party owned projects of differing DER types. With that, your first decision point with regard to FI is, should the Commission require the company to file an FI tariff And if so, should it require the contents and reporting ACE recommends? And finally, should the company be required to field the FI pilot ACE describes? I can pause here for your deliberations or provide a recommendation.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in here. I mean, I'd also take a step back and find that the company has not complied with the statutory requirement, and in other areas, it seems like the company has similarly decided not to follow prior settlement agreements and commission orders. So I would find that the company is out of compliance with the statute and required to submit the flexible interconnect tariff as specified by ACE and to conduct the pilot program that ACE recommends. And more broadly, I just say I'm really struggling with the company's inability or unwillingness to comply with, in certain instances with the statute, our orders, and prior settlement agreements, particularly as I don't really see a regulatory stick or consequence that can meaningfully deal with situations like this. So under these circumstances, I'm trying to brainstorm various approaches to create incentives to ensure that the company implements the goals of the statute. One idea that I haven't fully vetted with advisors or counsel is some additional incentive or cost recovery mechanism, perhaps outside the GMAC, which I believe is driven by its own statutory considerations and obligations, to see if we can better implement the statutory goals. But just curious if you're feeling that same frustration and struggle that I am with, and we've talked about this before with, how BE and EV loads are on peak and the hosting capacity filings and information that weren't in compliance. So I don't know. Do you share that frustration, Commissioner Gilman? And what are we going to do about it? I mean, it just seems like they ignored the statute.
Yep. Yeah.
That's it. Yep.
Well, there's a few parts of that question. I mean, yes, it does appear to me that the statute requires them to file an interconnection tariff. An odd and self-serving interpretation that we're perhaps already there with the current proposal. We are not, and I think they need to file an interconnection tariff for the statute. Yeah, I think, and I will point out, this isn't, I mean, perhaps the reference to interconnection tariff is newer. In the BE barriers proceeding, we identified, especially when the grid was unable to accommodate new loads, really the need for the company to provide alternative pathways, additional information to applicants, like how the use of DERs, demand response, or other controls could help get them online. So even this issue is not new. This is something I think the commission has already been telling the company. We have to be able to provide people more options to be able to serve customers in a more cost-effective and timely manner. And so this is like one facet of it, is moving forward with flexible interconnection for DERs, with flexible interconnection for loads. But, I heard frustration certainly from customers even before that statutory requirement that I relayed to the company, and saying we have to provide people with more information and more options so we can actually serve them to the best of our ability. So this is kind of one piece of that. So yeah, certainly frustrated by this as well as several of the other pieces. And I think that will probably factor back into our discussion kind of when we loop back around about, has what's been provided laid out a pathway to strategically serve those state goals or work toward those state goals. And I think that will be the key question in a lot of like the GMAC discussions. And this is one clear example where not only is there, potentially not a good faith effort to even comply here, but this gets directly to one of those state goals, is getting DERs, getting new customers and loads connected, in a cost-effective and timely manner. And flexible interconnection clearly is one tool that could be available. So I think limiting that option, dragging our feet, acting like a more narrow option is really all that's necessary here. Certainly gets to the bigger question, I think, to your point of, does it appear the company is actually strategically trying to meet those state goals? So I just expect to, this is one of several examples that we can probably point to as we loop back to that discussion on has what's been laid out in this record and general, what we've seen generally actually been a strategic and affordable pathway to achieving those state goals. So maybe more than you wanted, but that's how I
No.
put them together.
I mean, for me, there's like 5 things. It's reliability, customer service and billing, energization, processes and timelines, this flexible interconnect, and just more dynamically integrating supply and demand, particularly shifting EVs and BE off system load. And I'm just wondering if there has to be some other incentive, maybe in this case that's I'm even thinking outside the GMAC, given how restricted and bound that is by statute, to get these goals implemented in a world where their company is just failing to comply with the statute and our orders. So maybe more on that tomorrow, and I may come back and try and suggest some more specifics. But Commissioner Plant, thoughts? How are you feeling about all this?
Kind of similar to you guys. As it relates to sort of an incentive, I mean, I get the reasoning for it. I feel like, giving a financial incentive for following the law seems like we're really hitting the bottom of the barrel at that point. But
I'm just struggling to see the regulatory sticks and consequences that get this implemented.
yeah, I mean, I think, rather than, being a performance incentive, I think there could be, sort of a penalty to not achieving, the certain timeframes. I mean, if I'm going to be charitable about it, I think that, looking at it, big picture, Excel has in their minds their plan. They're going to do their aggregator DERMS, and they're going to slowly integrate, testing the grid DERMS, and then they're going to do the grid DERMS, and then they say, oh, at that point, we'll be able to accommodate, flexible interconnection. And I think that while that's fine from the company perspective of how they, see these things being implemented, I think it fails to acknowledge the urgency that not only we've talked about here, but it was reflected in the statute. It was a part of the comments that we heard from the various different parties that flexible interconnection is really an urgent thing to get done. And you don't wait until you've gone through all these various different multi-year components of your plan before you implement it. And I think that what some of the parties, ACE, AEU, proposed here, I think is a good interim step to get flexible interconnection implemented, get it operating on the system. I would say, the company should be implementing it with an eye toward how it integrates then later down the line with grid DERMS, but we don't wait for grid DERMS in order to comply with the statute.
Well, maybe tomorrow I'll try and come back with some ideas about how we somehow get a pool of money, incentive stack, I don't know, to and see if we can identify some metrics grounded in the statute and this record that require the company to perform more tightly than they've shown in this plan, perhaps. So, Commissioner Plant.
Can we make recovery in the GMAC contingent upon having an operating flexible interconnection program?
Yeah, maybe. Oh, I mean, maybe. I'd like to make, I mean, I don't know. That's a legal question. I'm not prepared to answer now. But I'd like to see it broader. Outages, customer service, energization timelines, and shift in EV and BV load off peak, through effective managed charging. So that's my list of issues. I don't know if you have additional issues, and I don't know if we can, what we can do with the GMAC, or whether we have to do something outside the GMAC. So I'll try and take that up with council today. But I'm really feeling the need to really find a way to tie money to performance. So I don't know, Commissioner Gilman, anything else before we get back to the decision matrix?
No, I mean, I agree with that general sentiment. And so I think that's the main task for us tomorrow, is my guess.
All right. Mr. Grinberg, does that give you what you need on this one? I think we're going to have a finding that they're out of compliance, and we're going to basically do what Ace asked.
Yes, there's a related decision point that regards some of what you were just discussing, particularly what Commissioner Plant brought up. And that regards forms of flexible interconnection that don't require a DERMS. AEU urges the Commission to require the company to quickly enable FI for resources during the term of this DSP, including increasing opportunities for the use of FI with static limits, expanding the types of technologies and use cases eligible for flexible interconnection, and adopting California's limited generator profile approach that allows DERs to schedule reduced generation output from their projects at specified times rather than pay to expand system carrying capacity. In particular, AEU advocates that the company be required to move ahead with forms of FI that do not require a DERM, such as FI utilizing load management control equipment to implement static load limits, or utilizing autonomous inverter control to limit export from solar generators, or establishing load ramp schedules in interconnection agreements that conform with grid capacity availability. So your second decision point here regarding FI is, should the Commission require the company to implement alternate forms of FI that do not require grid DERMS? I have a recommendation if you'd like, or I can pause here.
I think I'll just turn it over to Commissioner Plant.
Well, I mean, I think I would like your recommendation. But I do like the recommendations from AEU. I looked a little bit into California's limited generator profile, which I wasn't very familiar with, and it seems like a good approach, certainly in the short term, and perhaps more integrated into the offerings in the long term. But Mr. Greenberg, I'd love to hear your recommendation.
Mr. Greenberg.
Okay, advisors agree with AEU's proposed use of static limits, interconnection agreements with appropriate terms, and the limited generator profile approach, as these methodologies can enable DER and load interconnection by limiting generation or load to existing grid capacity availability, even in the absence of or prior to the implementation of grid DERMS or development of specific DERMS use cases, thereby improving grid utilization and avoiding or delaying the need for grid capacity upgrades, which would be more costly. We therefore recommend the Commission require the company to develop and include in the FI tariff filing provisions implementing the use of static or scheduled export or load limits, as well as interconnection agreement provisions limiting maximum load ramping so that new or expanding customers' load growth corresponds with grid capacity availability. These provisions should apply to resources on either side of the meter. We further recommend a requirement that upon determining that the distribution system can't accommodate a prospective customer's full load or generation, the company must inform the customer of the availability of these alternatives to grid capacity expansion in the tariff.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree on that point, and I just had two kind of minor clarifications for the previous point or discussion. Chairman, do you want me to do those now, or do you all just want to?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Oh, just two things. First of all, I don't know that the finding necessarily is they're out of compliance, because I don't know that there was necessarily a deadline in statute for this, perhaps in terms of what should be reasonably expected. But to me, it's more that what they filed in the res plan and their plans do not comply with statute, and it will require an actual tariff filing. And to that point, Mr. Greenberg, should we put on this an expectation as to when that tariff will be filed, a deadline to actually?
Yes, thank you. My recommendation was going to be that it be filed within 60 days of the final phase one decision in this proceeding.
Okay, great.
Thanks
Yeah.
for catching that.
Then, well, so with those two clarifications, but technically, I don't think there has been a deadline yet, although it seems as though we're all fairly frustrated at the interpretation and slowness, and that now it will be expected within 60 days with the considerations we've discussed today. And I think, I don't know if we need to clarify. I mean, to me, this is interconnection for both DERs as well as for load, but I don't know if that's a clarification that needs to be made, Mr. Greenberg. I think that's within some of the language already.
Yeah, and I did say that, but thank you for putting emphasis on it. It is for both, as you said, generation and load.
Okay, great. That's all I got.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with everything she said. And also with the recommendation.
As do I.
All right. I'd like to move now to a discussion of the non-wires alternatives, or NWA, and targeted demand area, or TDA, settlement. The company testifies that the NWA TDA settlement provisions have broad support and get the ball rolling on developing solutions for the 5 most actionable NWA opportunities. The settlement would establish an annual process for NWA solicitations. Following the conclusion of the annual distribution system planning cycle in October of each year, the company would circulate its plans for NWAs and TDAs to the stakeholders prior to conducting a workshop with them. The reviewed plan would then be filed with the Commission under the previous DSP proceeding. This process is envisioned as running through December. The company would release RFPs based on the modified plan from January through June of the following year. In July and August of each year, the company would present the results of these RFPs, including bids entered, company evaluation of bids, and company decisions on which bids to move forward with. Stakeholders would then have 30 days to submit comments, following which the Commission would have 30 days to review all input. The company would then move forward to execute contracts, absent a directive from the Commission not to. The settlement also specifies that within 120 days of the final phase one decision in this proceeding, the parties will convene and finalize a proposal to develop additional details for the rolling NWA process. The NWA TDA settlement contains minimal provisions regarding TDAs. Targeted demand areas. These are that 1, the company will conduct annual tracking and reevaluation of TDAs, including identification of additional areas where TDAs could defer or avoid longer-term conventional upgrades. And 2, the company and settling parties will jointly identify additional TDA opportunities for proposal in appropriate future proceedings. CEO, AEU, WRA, Boulder, SWEEP NRDC, and ACE all support this settlement in their SOPs. There is no opposition to the settlement, and advisors recommend that the Commission approve it.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree.
As do I.
Okay, moving on now to a couple of decision points about pilot programs. The company proposes a TDA pilot addressing projected risks on 3 banks and 2 feeders in 3 different distribution divisions, which represent a diverse mix of residential customers and commercial customers, and therefore has the potential to provide the company with experience across various customer demographics. The company notes that it plans to use budget from the existing 2024 through 2026 DSM plan for the pilot, and so needs no additional budget approval in this proceeding. Denver recommends expanding the TDA concept so that it couples demand control measures with beneficial electrification, promotes managed EV charging, and offers controllable smart panels. Denver argues that the TDA concept should leverage local knowledge and local initiatives, such as the gas planning pilot community process created by HB 24-1370, which seeks to avoid expansion of or decommission portions of the company's gas system. Denver advocates that public service should engage collaboratively with local governments on its implementation of TDAs to ensure that it can leverage additional resources and local knowledge, better incorporate development patterns and priorities, or coordinate with community-based organizations and local outreach efforts. It asks the Commission to direct the company to report on the outcomes in subsequent DSPs, along with any recommendations as to program modifications. The first decision point on this is, should the Commission approve the TDA pilot as proposed by the company or as modified by Denver? I can provide a recommendation here or just listen to your deliberation.
I think we'd welcome a recommendation.
All right. Advisors see Denver's proposals with regard to the TDA pilot to be friendly amendments that the company has expressed no opposition to. Accordingly, we recommend that the Commission approve the proposed TDA pilot, but also include decision language setting the expectation that in implementing TDAs, the company would emphasize managed EV charging and demand response measures, potentially including smart panels, rather than relying solely on end-use efficiency, and setting the expectation that the company will leverage the expertise and efforts of local governments in designing and implementing TDA approaches. Finally, we recommend including the reporting requirement Denver requests to ensure the Commission and parties have information needed to understand the company's implementation efforts in future proceedings.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I also agree. And Mr. Greenberg, in Denver's proposal, I think they talked about deploying smart panels on households located in constrained meters as a sort of a part of the pilot. Is that included in this, or is that a separate?
I do think that you are correct. Denver made a lot of recommendations regarding smart panels. And as we'll get to in a moment, there's potential conflict, in my mind, there's potential conflict in what might be offered in the VPP program. But we could certainly put language in the decision, if you like, that references, smart panels and other demand response technologies that might be particularly useful on constrained feeders.
Yeah, that would be great. And I think it does sort of intertwine with the VPP stuff. I mean, one of their components of their recommendation, I think, was to work with aggregators on, managing consumption during peak times on those constrained meters. And so to whatever extent it sort of integrates with different decision items, I think that would be great. And I would agree with the recommendation.
As do I.
All right. Your next decision point regards a recommendation by Denver with support from AEU to require a pilot to specifically test smart panels. Smart panels can limit a home's peak load in response to a utility or aggregator signal. They can also save homeowners money directly by limiting peak demand to the existing service capacity, potentially avoiding the need for a costly service upgrade when electrifying heating or transportation. Denver recommends that the Commission require the company to follow PG&E's example and implement a smart panel pilot, noting that they can be incorporated into a virtual power plant to avoid certain grid investments. So the question for you is whether to require such a pilot. And I can offer a recommendation or listen to your deliberations.
I think we'd welcome a recommendation.
All right. Advisors see both advantages and disadvantages to the pilot Denver recommends. On the one hand, it would give the company experience with this promising technology, but on the other hand, it could potentially compete with the efforts of developers who might want to use the technology in conjunction with their AVPP projects. Moreover, your previous decision includes a directive that smart panels be considered in the company's TDA efforts. Advisors therefore recommend that the Commission not direct the company to implement a pilot focused on smart panels at this time, but instead direct it to consider their use as part of TDA projects and to require the company to propose a smart panel pilot as part of its next DSM strategic issues proceeding for potential implementation, depending in part on whether smart panel project is planned or underway via the AVPP program.
Commissioner Gilman.
I'm happy to let Commissioner Plant go first. I think he's been closer to some of these issues. I'm curious to hear his perspective on it.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, so I don't know if I think that you're right within the TDA and also, as a component of next DSP, but I wonder if this pilot could be offered as a component of the VPP. So, for example, I mean, what they're looking for, what I think Denver is looking for, are aggregators who would use smart panels to address constraints, on those constrained feeders, and in order to demonstrate sort of how effectively they can do that. And it seems like in their as they open the VPP program up to aggregators, they could specifically request aggregators who would be able to do that to be a part of a pilot, and see if they get participation from aggregators, implementing smart panels to try and demonstrate the effectiveness of that. I mean, if they don't get any aggregators to, that want to, participate in that way, then that, sort of sends a bit of a signal too. But if there are some out there, who would, use span panels or the Schneider panels or whatever it might be in order to, address some of these constraints, I think it would be really a valuable part of that initial VPP rollout as a pilot. And I don't know, is that something that, Mr. Greenberg, you think could be sort of incorporated into the VPP in sort of a similar way to what Denver is proposing?
It could. Now my read and recollection of the Denver testimony in this area was that they were suggesting that it be a company implemented pilot rather than a third party implemented. I could be wrong about that, and I'll I'd be happy to dive in and check. But regardless, I do think there might be issues constraining an RFP specifically for a specific technology. One option that I had considered would be to incorporate kind of factors in the selection criteria in the RFP, the VPP solicitation, that would favor smart panels. But it is diving a little deeper than I think we have record for. My concept, just my concept of requiring this as for potential, requiring as part of the next DSM filing, which I believe is due in next summer, is that it would be a backstop. And now there wouldn't be a whole lot of time between now and then for VPP proposals to come in, but there would be some opportunity for such proposals to come in, and if they didn't, then you would have this proposal in the DSM proceeding to consider, which would be sooner than the next DSP. That was my reasoning.
Yeah, I think, that makes sense. If we could put in, I don't know if you guys are amenable to put in some language that would um, have the company encourage potential VPP participants to consider um, uh, participating in a smart panel kind of a pilot as a part of their aggregator status, and see if there are takers for that, and then if they don't get enough to really sort of launch a real pilot through that, maybe we could talk about that within the DSM. I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
Commissioner Gellman?
Well, I'm kind of glad you went first because you have better ideas than me. But like I agree. I mean, Mr. Greenberg's con was perhaps public service is not the right developer or purveyor of this, and it could kind of compete with or cannibalize what we could get in the VPP. So I think you're really on the right track with, like, yeah, don't duplicate efforts. A lot of the purpose of this technology could be to aid in a VPP. So allow it to kind of naturally grow in there, but try to kind of study what is going on in there with respect to smart panels and like. So I really like that angle. Like I think that's the smartest way to take it. I'm hesitant to put any additional kind of requirements on the VPP here, especially like without some decent oversight. That's just weird interpretations and people getting kicked out and things. Like I don't think we need any of that. But perhaps there's maybe the proposal comes in the DSM plan. But perhaps there's either some really modest incentive or a way for the company to work with the VPP implementers to get data from them specifically to evaluate the performance and kind of use cases being deployed for the smart panels. So, they're not deploying, they're not getting in between that VPP situation, but could collect the information as a potential way. I mean, I think that's kind of what you were talking about, and I like that route better than the complication of trying to have the company deploy the same exact things. Like that gets a little rough. So, I guess maybe what I would say is we have a lot of interest, especially in ensuring we understand this technology, understand its future role. In a lot of these programs, and to the extent the company can without making new restrictions, can work with VPP providers to get some of this data sharing and come up with an apparatus to study and understand, that's great. And to the extent they can't, we'd like a proposal in the next DSM plan as to how they could help to collect and analyze that data.
Commissioner Plant, that seems to make some sense to me, but
Yeah,
want to hear back
I
from
like
you.
that. I like that approach. I mean, part of this is as we're electrifying, it may be that, aggregators are coming in with a certain electrification, program for customers that then requires a service upgrade. And instead of a service upgrade, they could put in a smart panel that would avoid, that. And if there was an additional product that the service panel could participate in within the VPP, I think that would be advantageous. And so I think the approach that Commissioner Gilman laid out makes sense, and hopefully we can create an avenue for that to be integrated in the VPP program at some point.
Mr. Greenberg, does that give you what you need?
I think it does, yes. I take it you agree as well.
I do.
Okay. Okay, moving on now to alternatives analysis for downtown Denver. Noting the difficulty and high cost of expanding electric service in downtown Denver, the City and County of Denver, or CCD, asked that the commission require the company to conduct an analysis of the potential for a thermal energy network, or TEN, to defray infrastructure costs across the company's electric, gas, and steam systems. Denver claims that despite the previous analyses of the potential for an ambient loop thermal network, it does not know whether that project is the least cost alternative because the company has not performed a comprehensive alternatives analysis. Denver notes that its own study suggests that an ambient loop could reduce peak heating demand by at least 2/3 and contends that this potential should be explored fully. Denver further complains that under its current policy, the company excludes the downtown network distribution system from eligibility for NWAs, thereby eliminating the consideration of a downtown thermal network as an NWA. Denver recommends that this analysis use approved NWA and NPA methodologies as a baseline to develop an integrated approach that considers impacts across the company's electric, gas, and steam systems and incorporates societal, health, and ratepayer impacts. Finally, Denver supports the company's proposed demonstration of the NCORD platform to optimize planning across its gas and electric systems, and asks that the Commission direct the company to evaluate and report on NCORD's ability to conduct the alternatives analysis that Denver seeks. Public Service argues that it is unnecessary for the Commission to require the study Denver requests because the Commission has already approved a settlement in proceeding 22A-0382ST, which is the company's prior steam resource plan, that requires it to assess the potential for a thermal network as an alternative as part of its next steam resource plan, which must be filed no later than November 1st, 2028, so 3 years from now. The decision point here is whether or not to require the alternatives analysis that Denver recommends. I'll pause here, or I can offer a recommendation.
Yeah, a recommendation would be great.
All right. The company is correct that the settlement in proceeding 22A-0382ST already requires much or all of what Denver is asking for in its 2028 steam resource filing. In particular, settlement paragraph 23 requires that the filing include a base case business as usual scenario, a least cost scenario that supports the state's GHG reduction targets, and a proposal that transitions current steam customers away from the steam service to a lower carbon alternative. Paragraph 24 of the settlement requires the company to provide 1, a technical assessment of alternative technologies, 2, a regulatory assessment of the company's options and preferred regulatory proposals for the system, 3, a review of cost projections related to the company's proposals for the steam system, including for the company's steam, electric, and gas utilities, and the appropriate allocation of such costs among customers. 4, a customer transition assessment, including proposed timelines and regulatory approaches to manage the transitions. And 5, a carbon emissions assessment for each alternative. Given these provisions, advisors see little incremental benefit from ordering similar requirements in this proceeding, and therefore recommend not doing so. Nonetheless, Denver's suggestion that the NCORD platform might prove to be a useful tool for the analysis it seeks, or the analysis required in the next steam system plan, we think that's reasonable. Advisors therefore recommend that the Commission direct the company to evaluate whether the NCORD platform that it is proposed in this proceeding as a demonstration project is a viable tool to support the alternatives analysis required in the next steam system plan, and to report on its findings in the next DSP application filing.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks, Mr. Greenberg. Yeah, I generally agree. I mean, I feel like there's some long created frustration here from Denver. And I think they lay out a enviable vision of how we can coordinate planning here. Hopefully that NCORD allows for some of that to advance and be better. I get that they would certainly like to move forward with that vision, and it's hard to find the right venue. I certainly recognize that. Where we consider steam isn't where we consider the electric system impacts, isn't where we consider the gas options. And so, I really am sympathetic to, I think, them unfortunately hearing the message likely in several venues, well, this isn't the venue where we're going to deal with these exact concerns. But I agree that I think we have a path forward here, and certainly hope Denver stays engaged here in trying to promote the vision of this coordinated planning, and that really continues to advance with the new systems available to the company as you've identified.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I agree. And just for clarification, Mr. Greenberg, I think what you were saying is that it would be, that analysis would be in the next DSP that would move at least that analysis up a year, right?
So the analysis in the next DSP would be an evaluation of whether the NCORD platform is a viable tool for the company to use in what it's required to provide in its next STEAM resource plan, which again would be filed in 3 years from today, or not today, but about 3 years from now in November 2028.
And I agree with that. Would it be beneficial to just have that analysis that they were going to put in the 2028 STEAM resource plan, just have it as a part of the DSP, which would be in 2027, and maybe that would allow for, the consideration of inclusion in the next STEAM plan instead of just having a report? I'm just trying to see if there's any way we can kind of move things up a little bit. I don't know if that messes with the settlement or anything like that, but is that a possibility?
Well, you do raise a legal question there. I think from Denver's standpoint, it would be wonderful to not have to wait 3 years for that study to be, presented. I'm not sure about the practicalities, the amount of time and budget that would be necessary. But I see Ms. Dundas has turned on her camera and may want to weigh in on the impact of changing a term of an approved settlement. So I'll yield.
Thanks, Mr. Greenberg. I think we'll probably have to bring this back, but just so I understand what Commissioner Plant's asking, you're suggesting the study get filed prior to the next DSP?
No, I think right now there's the overall analysis of the STEAM system is supposed to go in the next STEAM resource plan, which is November 28. What the advisor recommendation was to evaluate the NCORD software platform as it might, be involved in that that system in the next DSP, which is probably the end of 27. And I'm just wondering if we might be able to just have the whole analysis, including the NCORD software program, but also the analysis that was going to be a part of that 2028 STEAM resource plan, just have it be in the next DSP, so that it basically moves it up by a year. But I think that the settlement was to have them do the analysis in the next STEAM resource plan as opposed to the next DSP.
Okay, so I think that Mr. Greenberg highlighted what is the relevant concern here, which is modifying a settlement term always comes with risk. We could encourage them to file it early in the decision, or you could take the vote to require that early. But as we've discussed in other situations, modifying one term sometimes has unintended consequences to the overall agreement.
All right, well, I'll just propose that we encourage then.
Does that work for you?
In a non-threatening way.
You can do it. You can threaten if you want.
For what good it does.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a different problem. Commissioner Goen?
Yeah, I think that works. And yeah, I think that works. I mean, part of the focus, I think, should be on like, how do we build the apparatus to make that actual eventual analysis and filing as useful as possible, which very unfortunately requires this multidisciplinary look. We have to look across all the systems and understand. And so we don't want to get too far down the road before realizing we don't have all the proper pieces to get that done.
Does that give you what you need on this one, Mr. Grimberg?
Yes, it does. All right, moving along. This next decision point regards the special project screen the company applied in determining which major distribution grid projects would be eligible for NWA consideration. Using this screen, the company eliminates projects from NWA consideration that are intended for asset end of life replacement, that have certain unique attributes, or, as relevant for this discussion, are on the downtown Denver network system. Denver contends that this screen is poorly conceived, unnecessary, and in contravention of commission rules. Denver notes that the company's justification for this screen is that the network system design does not allow for electricity to be exported onto the system and therefore prevents DERs from interconnecting to the system. However, Denver points out that the company has developed solutions that have enabled network customers to adopt generating DERs, and that this company practice is in contravention of several commission rules. Denver further points to Commissioner Gilman's questioning of company witness Brenda McDermott at hearing, in which Ms. McDermott agreed that the company's elimination of all potential NWAs from the network system was overly broad and that non-generating alternatives could be considered as NWAs on the network system. Denver therefore asked the commission to direct the company to remove the special project screen as it relates to the network system and develop a modified process to explore the potential for cost-effective NWAs on the network system, including thermal energy networks. The company does not address this issue in its SOP, but in rebuttal testimony, company witness David Mino justifies the company's practice by stating that generation cannot be exported onto the network system and that non-exporting technologies are insufficient to offset service application growth. The decision point here is whether to require the company to remove its blanket prohibition on NWA on the Denver network system. I'll just briefly state that advisors agree entirely with Denver on this point. The existing screen is overly broad and unjustified. The commission should direct the company to remove this prohibition and replace it with one that appropriately limits or prevents the export of generation from any equipment installed as part of an NWA on the network system. So I kind of ran right into my recommendation there. I hope that was okay, but I'll pause here for your conversation.
I think we can live with that. Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Greenberg. I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
As do I.
All right, very well. Now on to a related request by Denver that large geothermal and other load offsetting technologies be explicitly recognized as NWA eligible technologies. Denver expresses concern that the company's NWA process may not clearly recognize the potential of thermal energy networks and other load offsetting technologies to contribute to NWAs. Denver therefore asks the commission to direct the company to modify its NWA process to ensure that such technologies are explicitly allowed to participate in NWAs. I can offer a recommendation or pause here for your conversation.
We'd welcome a recommendation.
All right. Advisors believe that Rule 3527F establishes a sufficiently broad definition of DER such that these technologies are already viable contributors to NWA. While thermal energy networks are not listed in that rule, it does state explicitly that the definition is not limited to the technologies that are listed. However, we see no harm in stating this explicitly in the decision and so recommend that the commission do so.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
As do I.
All right. At this point, I think we're going to move to Mr. Eden for a discussion of the virtual power plant settlement agreement.
Before we do, thank you, Mr. Greenberg, for taking us through that in a quick and efficient way. Appreciate it. Mr. Eden.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll be presenting the topic of the Aggregated Virtual Power Plant, or VPP, settlement. At a high level, the company's VPP program is a voluntary program that offers aggregators of distributed energy resources, or DERs, performance-based compensation for capacity to support the system as requested by the company. The VPP program compensates aggregators, who in turn compensate customers for the value that VPPs provide to the electric system. By providing energy or reducing load, VPPs can reduce the need for additional generation, transmission, and distribution investment. As you know, on August 15th, Public Service filed a comprehensive VPP settlement agreement. The VPP settlement was joined by staff, Boulder, WRA, AEU, ACE, CREZ, Sun, and Tesla. Only UCA and Mr. Althouse oppose portions of the VPP settlement, although several other parties take no position on it. I'll provide a quick overview of the VPP settlement for context before setting up your vote on the individual challenges to the VPP settlement. So, the VPP settlement establishes a standard offer framework in which any eligible aggregator can receive a set compensation for VPP services pursuant to the agreed upon tariff on a first come, first served basis until a 25 megawatt per year limit is met. The company set this 25 megawatt per year cap based on their requested $79 million budget, which would be allocated over 5 years. The VPP settlement prohibits the company from acting as an aggregator for the first 24 months of the program. The VPP compensation is comprised of 3 components: generation, transmission, and distribution. Only VPPs located on targeted feeders and banks that have a historical peak period between 4 p.m. through 10 p.m. in the summer months are eligible to receive the distribution credit. In addition, the VPP settlement caps the total amount of VPP resources that can be located on a single feeder or bank and commits the company to providing geospatial data regarding the specific feeders that are eligible for the distribution compensation. The VPP settlement further establishes the performance requirements and parameters of the VPP dispatch events. For instance, the VPP settlement caps the annual VPP events for year-round resources at 80 and commits the company to make best efforts to provide 24 hours notice prior to VPP events. The VPP settlement recognizes, however, that the company may need to call VPP events within 1 hour. After the VPP program has been operational for 2 years, Public Service will make an evaluation advice letter filing proposing to continue, modify, or discontinue the program. Under the VPP settlement, this evaluation advice letter will specifically address whether to include an express allocation of minimum VPP capacity to targeted capacity-constrained distribution feeders, as well as a proposed competitive solicitation of 5 megawatts. Finally, the VPP settlement established numerous reporting requirements and 2 separate stakeholder processes to continue developing the VPP program. So those are some of the main highlights of the VPP settlement. Unless there are any questions, I'll start going through UCA's challenges first.
Go ahead.
In its answer testimony, UCA offered several recommendations for the VPP program, including requiring more information regarding the location of overloaded feeders, calculating the distribution credit based on the estimated costs of specific distribution projects, and mandating that VPPs be acquired through a competitive bidding process instead of a standard offer payment. In its SOP, however, UCA only challenges the VPP settlement based on the initial lack of a competitive solicitation. UCA argues that a competitive solicitation puts pressure on our aggregators to provide VPP capacity at the lowest cost. UCA acknowledges that a competitive solicitation might make it more difficult for aggregators to participate in an immature VPP program, but asserts that if the market can do the same service at a lower price, that means the ratepayers are footing the bill for a higher cost service. Even if the Commission sticks to the proposed standard offer framework, UCA argues the Commission should at least require some amount of competitive procurement from the start. Several parties oppose UCA's position. For instance, Sun asserts that Senate Bill 24-218 requires the VPP program to be implemented through a tariff with a performance-based compensation structure, as opposed to a competitive solicitation. ACE similarly opposes UCA's position, asserting that aggregators are fundamentally different from bulk power system resources procured through competitive solicitation. ACE asserts that using a competitive solicitation to acquire VPPs is just as likely to chill participation as it is to yield lower prices. According to AEU, not having a competitive solicitation until after the first 2 years is critical because it will provide time and opportunity to establish the VPP program, iron out program details, and develop a structure for a competitive solicitation proposal. In its SOP, staff does not directly address UCA's arguments, but endorses the VPP settlement without modification. Staff argues the VPP settlement's path to consider a competitive solicitation after the first 2 years promotes long-term fairness and feasibility of the VPP program. I'll stop here for any questions, or I can proceed to a recommendation on UCA's challenges.
Commissioner Gilman, preferences?
No, look, I take UCA's criticism here, and I think in a perfect world, almost everything would be competitively bid and we'd get the best possible price. But this is certainly new to us here, new implementation. I don't even think we have the right apparatus ready to put this out to bid. So I think it's crucial in these first few years to just get the experience with the standard offer, and then can certainly move there as we perfect this. But I think we could really kill it before it gets started if we try and get it absolutely perfect from the start. There's a lot that we're going to learn. And so I think the settlement provides a really rational way to do that. And so I don't discredit their motivation here, but it's unfortunately an idea for just a little later in the process, especially so that we can actually structure such a solicitation appropriately to get not only the best price, but also the best results and the most optimization for the system. And I don't think we'd be able at this point to ensure that that better price doesn't represent kind of an inferior result or product. And so I think that's a lot of what I really hope to learn so that we can structure that later in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. But I have to say, reading Mr. Neal's answer testimony, I found myself agreeing with most of what he was saying. And ultimately, if this opportunity is going to be used to avoid distribution, transmission, and generation, it's going to have many of the attributes that UCA and Mr. Neal talk about. It's got to scale. It's got to have penalties for failure to perform, not just less incentive payments, but real penalties. And it's got to have competitive bidding, and it has to scale. So I would just in our order, I'd like to just talk about the long-term goals, including competitive bidding and the comments Mr. Neal made in his answer testimony, and at least point the right direction about where we're headed. And I'd certainly like to see more than 5 megawatts competitively bid. It just has to get competitive tension, scale, and real incentives to perform if it's going to mean anything. Otherwise, it's just payments to developers that don't really meaningfully reduce capital spend and resource need. So that's what I'd say. Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. And I mean, we're trying to create a market here. We don't have an aggregator market, right now. So we're really trying to create a situation that will attract participation in a market. And I agree with you, maybe down the line, once there are established aggregators and we have a robust market of participants here, that we could start to look at how we constrain costs through a competitive process, or penalties, as you're saying, or things like that. Right now, I feel like we need to get companies participating in the program, or else we just don't have a program. So Yeah, I agree.
Just you get these programs started down the wrong track and it's really tough to fix later. So does that give you what you need on this one, Mr. Eden, to draft an order?
I think so. I heard a 3-0 vote to reject UCA's challenges, but talk about the long-term vision for the VPP program and the ideas that UCA had to make it more effective at reducing capital investment.
Yeah, I wouldn't say even reject. It's like find it's premature now, but where we're headed in the future. I mean, I just found myself agreeing what UCA said. It just is, I think, a little premature. So keep going, sir.
So Mr. Althouse raises several challenges. Mr. Althouse first argues that several value components of VPPs listed in SB 24218 were not included in the performance-based compensation agreed upon in the VPP settlement. More specifically, Mr. Althouse notes the VPP settlement allows public service to call VPP events with as little as 1 hour notice and argues the time value of energy delivered in such short notice is not compensated. He argues that DERs that can respond in less than 24 hours notice should be provided additional compensation. In addition, Mr. Althouse argues that prosumers must have grid information showing the locational value of their property before negotiating with an aggregator. He argues that simply leaving compensation to be worked out between the prosumers and aggregators is akin to throwing prosumers to the aggregator wolves without any protection. And finally, Mr. Althouse asserts that VPP settlement requires new emissions requirements beyond existing emission permitting. Mr. Althouse opposes this concept and argues that Colorado farmers should not be prevented from seeking biofuel grants to become prosumers. Mr. Althouse asserts that in Europe, VPPs have widely adopted biofuels to address periods where there is little wind and sun. In its SOP, Sun argues the Commission should approve the VPP settlement over Mr. Althouse's objections. According to Sun, the VPP settlement is designed to deliver a peak load reduction capacity service and that the component resources of the participating VPPs will be operated in a manner to provide that service. Sun asserts this compensation structure is an appropriate starting point for launching a VPP program and that the VPP settlement provides a framework that enables the program to adapt and unlock additional values over time. And I'll pause here unless you would like a recommendation on all three of Mr. Althouse's challenges.
I feel the same way about what Mr. Althouse said that I did about UCA, that everything he says is right, but maybe it's a bit premature. But Commissioner Gilman, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, likewise, I'm happy to hear Mr. Eden's recommendation.
All right. If you can give it quick, Mr. Eden. Well, what do you think, Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I would not support the challenges, Mr. Althouse's challenges. I think that one of the issues that he brings up in terms of the sub-hour or 1 hour notification, it's going to be difficult. I think that part of this is we're structuring this program for the aggregator DERMS, which is really going to be triggered through, scheduled events or, there's going to be specific notice, that we're going to be achieving, high load times and coincident peaks. And, it's a little bit more of a manual process that provides notification and the opportunity to opt out on the part of the participants. But one of the things that I did think about in looking at Mr. Althaus's comments is that perhaps as we move in the future to a grid terms system that's much more dynamic, that is maybe, trying to respond to very short time frames of coincident peak on a distribution system that's not, coincident with your bulk system peaks, but it's really addressing the operations of the distribution system. We might need to have a separate prosumer tariff, that goes along with, participation in a grid term system. So I would just invite the company's thoughts on that, and whether or not when we get to this more sort of rapid signal response sort of situation on a distribution system, whether or not some sort of a prosumer tariff at that point would enable, you know, uh, enable operation of a grid term system without having to have, specific participation or exclusion from specific events. Because I think that events will start to sort of drop off as as components, and it'll be more just signal response, signal response, signal response. And I think we might need to have a separate tariff for people who participate at that level.
Um, I guess, Mr. Eden, it sounds like, do you have enough to draft the order, or do you need to give the recommendation and have us discuss it and vote on it?
One quick follow-up question to Commissioner Plant on would the commission be encouraging public service to propose such a program in the evaluation advice letter that public service is set to file in 2 years? That's the same uh, point in time that public service will, propose a competitive solicitation, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, it's really more associated with the implementation of the grid terms component of this. I think with the aggregator terms, I think that the system that we have set up now with events and participation or non-participation, all that stuff, that all works. I just don't see it working in a grid terms environment, and I don't, and I just I'm not sure exactly what the right venue is for the company to propose, some sort of a alternative tariff for participants in the grid terms, or if they have other ideas of how that works. But I just kind of get stuck on, when we change from an aggregator terms to a grid terms scenario, it's going to take a different relationship with the customers that might have to be reflected in a different tariff.
Uh, Mr. Eden, how do we get you what you need to draft the order?
It sounds like there's a 3-0 vote to not adopt any of Mr. Althouse's uh, challenges or proposed uh, modifications to the VPP settlement, and that we would also provide a general encouragement to the company to consider how Mr. Althouse's first challenge regarding the less than 1 hour or less than 24 hours notice could factor into the need for a separate tariff that works into the grid terms once grid terms is operational.
I think maybe you have a 2-0 vote. I don't think we've heard from Commissioner Gilman quite yet, but Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to go.
No, I agree. You can give them the 3-0.
Does that give you what you need on this one, Mr. Eden?
I think so. So moving to CEO's request. CEO is one of those parties that technically took no position on the VPP settlement. In its SOP, however, CEO recommends the Commission prohibit public service from including VPP achievements in the company's calculation of its existing demand management PIM. CEO adds that any adjustments to the demand management PIM should occur in the next demand side management strategic issues proceeding and not in this DSP. For context with this issue, I'll note that in its direct public service, initially proposed including VPP performance within the company's demand management PIM. In response to concerns from WRA and staff, however, the company changed course in rebuttal and agreed that this issue can be addressed in future proceedings. While Public Service no longer seeks to modify the demand management PIM in this proceeding, the company asks that VPP capacity savings be counted toward meeting future demand management goals to avoid the potential for unintended consequences. WRA and staff both joined the VPP settlement, which adopts the company's rebuttal position, and CEO does not reference the company's rebuttal position in its SOP. Would you like a recommendation on this one?
Yeah.
Advisors recommend denying CEO's request regarding the demand management PIM to the extent it is inconsistent with the company's rebuttal position and the VPP settlement. Advisors recommend approving the company's approach regarding the interaction between demand management and VPP program as set forth in the company's rebuttal. Public Service raises legitimate concerns that customers currently enrolled in demand management programs could switch to a VPP instead.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Eden. I agree. I just want to, we've got demand management, VPP, which could commingle. And I'm not really opposed to the, reporting that they've laid out. I think my plea would be for consistency, that either all of it or none of it is counted. What I don't want to see is really an inability to compare performance or data or resources, that are committed to each program. I don't want to see an inability to be able to compare those from year to year so I think my concern is just to ensure that there is really an established protocol for this reporting and that it is applied consistently across the board. I don't want to see, well, some of it is kind of double counted in both, but not all. And then we just end up in a situation where we can't really understand performance or the resource there. So I know that's not the most clear way to articulate that. Maybe Commissioner Plan will fix it. But my only concern with hearing this is okay, I don't really care if you want to count it both. I need to know what the numbers mean in the future from year to year, from program to program. And so there has to be a protocol and consistency to make sure they mean something. But other than that, I'm fine with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant. No pressure.
I agree with the Gilman no mushy data amendment.
I'm just trying to think of the acronym GNMDA. Does that I agree. Does that give you what you need, Mr. Eden?
It does, yeah. So having addressed the above challenges to the VPP settlement, the remaining portions of the settlement are unopposed. I provided a broad overview of the VPP settlement earlier, but I'm happy to go into more detail or answer any questions. Otherwise, advisors recommend the Commission approve the VPP settlement without modification other than what was previously agreed upon. The VPP settlement sets forth a reasonable approach for launching Colorado's first VPP program and is supported by a broad range of stakeholders. Also, the evaluation advice letter filing that the company will make in 2 years provides the Commission an opportunity to refine the program after some initial momentum has been built.
And I just say, subject to all our conversations about the long-term goals in response to the UCA SOP and answer testimony, and in response to Mr. Aldhouse's statement of position and testimony. So as long as it's contextualized and acknowledges Commissioner Plant's comments about how we're shifting from an aggregator DERMS to a more of a pro prosumer or derms. As long as it's contextualized by all that, it works for me. Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
does that
Thanks.
give
That's
you
all I had on the VPP settlement.
Mr. Mendelson, where are we? I think you got some well, I won't speak for anybody else, but you got at least one exhausted commissioner. You want to keep going through the HCA stuff, or
Commissioner Gilman mentioned doing the first few on items there if you'd like. So we could tackle that. That would be Mr. Fetters to start us off.
yeah, can you just give me a 5-minute break? Well, how long do you think it'll take, Mr. Fetters? You want to just keep going for 15, 20 minutes?
I think 20 minutes should be able to get pretty far. Can you all hear me okay?
Say again.
Can you all hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, I think 15-20 minutes should be able to get us pretty far. The first couple issues are security related, and so there is a decent chunk of preamble there, since it was extensively discussed, but I think we could get through at least up to the decision points on security and a good conversation there in that sort of time frame.
All right, let's go 20 minutes. Fire away.
Sounds good. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Ian Fetters with y'all's advisory staff. And now we're going to talk about hosting capacity analyses and related issues. Per commission rule, each utility will develop hosting capacity analysis, or HCA, of its distribution system as part of its DSP. And per Senate Bill 24-218, the commission shall evaluate whether the DSP includes detailed mapping of distribution hosting capacity with appropriate safeguards to protect critical infrastructure as determined by the commission. I will refer to these as HCA maps throughout. Hosting capacity analyses and HCA maps are considered by parties in this proceeding to be an extremely useful part of the DSP. Various parties state that HCAs can be used for siting purposes, to avoid upgrade costs by targeting less saturated areas of the distribution system, and to reduce the number of applications needed. Parties also see the HCA maps as useful for distribution system planning, facilitating more efficient use of the grid, and better targeting grid upgrades to support DI communities or state goals. However, parties in this proceeding are also critical of the company's implementation of HCAs and HCA maps. Among others, parties claim that the non-standard NDA required to access the unblurred generation map, the load map not being published at all outside of this proceeding, and the slow update cadence of the HCA maps make the HCA substantially less useful than it otherwise could be, and have a plethora of recommendations on the subject. In these deliberations, we'll go through those recommendations. We'll first talk about security around the generation HCA and the associated generation HCA map. The generation HCA map is currently published by the company in two formats, blurred and unblurred. The blurred map is publicly accessible from the company's website and gives general indication of hosting capacity availability in areas. However, it does not actually show the locations of the distribution lines. To access the unblurred map, which allows visibility into the individual lines in their hosting capacity statistics, users are required to fill out an access request form, sign a custom non-disclosure agreement, or NDA, and then, if approved, sign in through a secure web portal to see the information. And although the blurred map does provide information on individual feeders through pop-up boxes, this data can only be downloaded in tabular format through the secure web portal after signing the NDA. The settlement in the 2022 DSP, which was approved by the Commission, decision number R230080, included a provision for the non-blurred maps only being available upon the signature of an NDA. However, that settlement also included a term allowing the settling parties to make any recommendation on the NDA that they choose in future proceedings. And indeed, several parties in this proceeding argue that the required NDA is problematic, characterizing it as onerous, unnecessary, and overly restricted. Some recommend that the Commission require modifications to the NDA, while others recommend it be eliminated altogether. Parties' arguments against the currently existing NDA take several forms. UCA, IREC, and AEU each recommend making the HCA data public. UCA asserts that PSCO has not provided sufficient evidence to warrant the confidentiality of the HCA data.
UCA characterizes the company's security warnings as unsubstantiated and contrasts PSCo's treatment of HCA data with that of several other utilities, particularly Pepco and PG&E, whose websites contain public maps showing locations and information about feeders in the vicinity of airports and other potentially sensitive areas. ACE claims that some of the NDA clauses subject signatories to significant liability and impose overly burdensome security requirements. ACE particularly calls out paragraph 6, which states that extent of damages would be difficult or impossible to ascertain, and there will be no adequate remedy at law in the event of a breach, and paragraph 10, which requires a litany of data safeguards. ACE asserts that smaller, medium-sized companies may not have the infrastructure to meet those security requirements. ACE asserts that no other utility in the U.S. requires NDAs to access HCA data, and that PSCo has not identified any actual documented threat from the release of HCA maps. ACE also states that no technical barriers or monitoring exist to prevent anyone from signing the NDA, thus potentially making it ineffective as a true barrier, instead serving as a chilling effect on legitimate use of the HCA. Finally, ACE argues that the NDA is inconsistent with the Commission's rules and previous rulemakings, citing to Commission Rule 3541B, which states that, quote, the utility may only deny access to its web portal if visitors and or registrants violate the terms of service or other agreed upon terms of access. ACE also notes that in the 2020 rulemaking, the Commission explicitly declined to authorize the proposal or implementation of NDAs for web portals, expressing concern over their impracticality for developers who must work with clients. IREC asserts that the company has failed to support its position that the NDA is justified due to security risks, that the risks are highly speculative, and that there are no known instances of attacks using HCA data, and that the company's citations to standards and reports do not actually create links between classifying data and protecting the grid. They assert that other approaches can provide security, including the authentication already required by the company and more equipment-focused solutions. IREC highlights that much of the HCA data can be found through other publicly available sources, such as Google Maps, and notes that NDAs are not required in other states, that other regulatory bodies, such as FERC and the California PUC, support Open Grid data, and claims that bad actors would not be stopped by an NDA or its provisions. IREC also highlights the unbounded liability created by paragraph 6, but additionally notes that other NDAs may have provisions that preclude liability for data that is already publicly available, while this NDA does not. They also highlight paragraph 13, which prevents signatories from disclosing that they have signed the NDA. IREC claims that requiring an NDA in any capacity would be counterproductive to HCA data, which it states is most useful when shared widely. For instance, developers and aggregators sharing the data with customers, researchers publishing results on the data, or the Commission using the data to better understand the impact of load growth on the grid. While they believe a revision could make the NDA more feasible to sign, it still would make the HCA less useful than it otherwise would be and would still have limited security value. AEU echoes other parties' criticisms that the company has not provided specific, compelling rationale for requiring the NDA or quantified how sharing the HCA data would increase the risks of attacks, and has not cited any studies or reports that specifically recommend limiting access to the data. They also highlight that other utilities provide this data without restrictions, and that the company did not provide any examples of other utilities requiring an NDA for this data. Tesla recommends requiring the use of the NDA used in Commission proceedings rather than the company's current NDA to access HCA data. Tesla agrees with other parties in the proceeding that the justification for not providing easy access to HCA maps is dubious, and that the company's position fails to incorporate and balance public policy objectives. They also state that requiring this NDA is more likely to prevent good faith actors from accessing information than bad faith actors. And CEO recommends that if the Commission does authorize an NDA, that it should require the company to work with parties and other stakeholders to edit the NDA to ensure all appropriate entities are able to sign it. CEO describes the current NDA as overly restrictive and asserts it cannot sign the NDA as it exists currently, particularly due to the indemnity clause. In rebuttal, PSCo largely leans on the security concerns of making HCA data public. In contrast with IREC saying that alternative security policies could serve in place of the NDA, PSCo notes that the NDA is one component of a more extensive security risk program already in place, with cybersecurity standards structured around the NIST security framework. PSCO states that NDAs are commonly used for multiple reasons in utilities as well as other industries, and notes that the Commission authorized the use of the NDA by approving the settlement in the previous DSP and granted the motion for extraordinary protection related to the load HCA data in this proceeding. While PSCO acknowledges that line locations are frequently publicly available, it also notes that underground feeders, which make up a substantial portion of PSCO's distribution system, are not visible this way, and that gathering data piecemeal is different from having it all together in a central location. With regards to other utilities making their HCA public, PSCO asserts it would be a, quote, dereliction of its responsibility to release information just because other utilities do so, and also points out that the Commission is not bound by decisions made in other jurisdictions. And in response to criticisms that HCA data has not been tied to any specific attacks or threats, PSCO asserts that it not only has to protect against types of attacks that have occurred previously, but also novel attacks that could occur in the future. So with all that, there are essentially four options that the Commission could go with. Option A is to reject the NDA entirely and require the company provide the unblurred map and tabular data publicly, which is the path recommended by UCA, ACE, AEU, and IRAC. Option B is to allow the unblurred map and tabular data to still be subject to an NDA, but the NDA shall be revised to essentially match that used by the company in typical Commission proceedings for access to highly confidential information, which is the recommendation from Tesla, and an alternative recommendation from ACE. Option C is to allow an NDA, but require the terms of the NDA to be amended to be more amenable to parties and stakeholders. So the preferred option of CEO, who recommends doing so via a stakeholder group, or it could be done by forming a working group and examining the issue through a separate proceeding, which is an alternative offered by UCA that PSCO is also amenable to. And finally, option D is to retain the NDA as it exists today as recommended by PSCO. So with that, I'll turn it over to y'all for discussion.
I mean, for me, I would find that the existing NDA has a number of provisions that are not commercially reasonable as outlined at hearing, and probably do what Tesla wants, which is just go to something like the Commission form NDA, with just commercially reasonable decisions. It's sort of unbelievable that we've spent hours of hearings time on an NDA. So that's where I land. I don't know if you guys agree or just think it should be public, but I at least take the company's concerns about security fairly seriously, but think it can be easily addressed through a standard NDA. So, Commissioner Gilman, where are you coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I share your frustration and the time spent in this proceeding, particularly on this issue, especially because this has been being talked about for at least 5 years that I've been aware of. Back from the 2022 settlement that the company signed to make HCA data available on a more frequent basis, and even before when we were doing the rulemaking for the DSP rules. And so, I think what's difficult is around this issue, the amount of frustration is really over the top with just the company's unwillingness and ability to hold up their side of the agreement in updates to this data. But with regard specifically to the security, I'm certainly leaning no NDA. The company has not really provided any compelling data or information as to why they're any different from the many, many utilities who publicly release this data. And it's been shown to be widely useful in a helpful context, especially for optimizing use of the grid and ensuring access to data for those trying to use it to optimize the grid. So, for me, we've been talking about this issue for 5 years, and I would very much like to move on from it. And in 5 years, we've been asking for kind of less vague arguments, more information. And I get, look, you can't game out every single thing that might happen, but it certainly seems reasonable that they could come up with some argument as to why they're different from other utilities in the country, many of whom make this information publicly available, and just none of that's ever happened. So, you know, to me, I have not seen the substantiation for an NDA at all. If we do need to go that way, I would certainly go with significantly simplifying it in a very standard context. We're not getting anywhere with the company dictating the terms of that. So we would have to establish something far more simple.
I mean, I share your I clearly share your frustration, and just the draft the company circulated was not commercially reasonable. So Commissioner Plant, I think you decide this one.
Yeah, I mean, I really came down on the side of making it a public, accessible HCA, no NDA, and just follow what other utilities have been doing on that front.
I think we got a 2-1 decision, and if you could just draft a footnote, Mr. Fetters, or have counsel draft a footnote saying that I found the existing company draft to be very commercially unreasonable and critical points as outlined by the parties, but would have probably gone to a simpler version. And then let's move forward with add an NDA on a 2-1 vote.
Sounds good. The other decision point, sort of on that same subject, and I promise has a shorter preamble, is
Please.
how the load map should be handled. So the conversation around the load HCA map is generally parallel with that around the unblurred generation map, but there are some differences. At a high level, load HCAs provide information on loading on feeders and could help inform customer decisions regarding new or expanded facilities that would increase load. Tabular load data is provided through a secure web portal subject to an NDA currently. However, unlike the generation map, at this time, the load HCA map is only available in this proceeding to parties which agree to the Commission's highly confidential data protections through a platform established by the company for this purpose. There is no load map available outside of this proceeding at all. Parties make similar arguments about the value of load HC information and the virtue of making that information more readily available to developers, aggregators, and other interested stakeholders. Say that it could inform customer decisions regarding siting facilities that would increase load and have a role in developing EV charging facilities and potentially even avoiding distribution upgrades. IREC describe it as a core tool in Governor Polis's greenhouse gas roadmap. And AEU also advocates for the publishing of the load HCA map as part of their SOP. In rebuttal, PSCO emphasizes that load information is particularly sensitive, could be used to determine which tax would be the most damaging, and states that the load map, quote, serves up sensitive information on a silver platter. PSCO also warns that overloaded feeders have less redundancy and load switching becomes less feedable as feeders become more loaded, and so load information could be used to identify the most vulnerable parts of the system. So the decision point is how to treat the load map, and I'll pause for y'all's discussion.
Well, do you have a recommendation on this? It looks brief.
Advisors recommend treating the load HCA map consistently with the generation HCA map. Ultimately, the same arguments about PSCO's lack of specificity and the importance of making the data available apply. So based on our previous conversation, that would be public, not requiring an NDA.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree.
I just have the same footnote that I prefer an NDA.
Thank you, commissioners. I think everything else is getting into different HCA territory. So we can either stop here and I can pass back to Mr. Mendelson to close out for the day, or we can keep going if y'all would like.
I think I'd prefer to close out for the day.
Okay.
Mr. Mendelson, what's the plan for tomorrow? You want to keep going and finish up this section 3, or do you want to jump back to the section 2 issues tomorrow, or
I want to make
Uh,
sure yeah, I thank you. I want to make sure we definitely cover step 2 issues, the GMAC cost recovery and what's eligible there. So and make sure that we're at least moving that forward.
Well,
So
and do we have an issue? I mean, is there a November 1st advice letter filing where we got to tell them what to do for 2026? Or are we just going to get an advice letter filing that we're going to have to suspend? Don't we have to at least give some guidance on 2026 tomorrow?
we do shortly, yes, but I think there's all those step 2 decisions to make about what is includable in the GMAC for 2026. So yeah, that's also putting pressure on us to deal with those issues first, and we could come back to the HCA data issues once that's complete. So
Okay.
I would recommend we start there tomorrow morning.
That works for me. Commissioner Gilman, anything else before we adjourn for the day?
Nope, nothing. Thanks.
Commissioner Plant?
Nothing else.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.